Hey, what's happening, everybody? Welcome to the program. Hi, I'm Jeff Gerstmann, and this is the Jeff Gerstmann Show. I'll be your host for this week's installment of the podcast, and we're here to talk about video games mostly. I don't know, video games and the money traps that surround them. I don't know. I am still reeling. I am still in a state of mild shock. Maybe I shouldn't be. Of course, it was always going to be like this. But last week we played Roblox, and I streamed out some Roblox. We checked in on Roblox, and the criminal is a strong word here. But I was very I was taken aback by the way that Roblox is so fucked up with monetization. If you're not familiar with Roblox, which I think a lot of the people watching that stream last week had either never seen Roblox or had not seen it in years. But it's funny to like back up and be like, well, here's what Roblox is. But like there's a lot of people that are just like, like they know it exists, they know it's a big deal, but they don't really hear that much about it. Roblox is if you play Fortnite and you saw that Fortnite suddenly expanded to have all these other games and user created things under it, that is them making Roblox. If you're aware of what Gary's Mod is doing, like the follow up to Gary's Mod, Sandbox. If you spend any time in that, which is a pretty small number of people probably, that is them, making something that is headed in a Roblox-like direction. But Roblox is a platform for user-generated content, and it has become so popular that some of that user-generated content is actually coming from full-on dev teams and people, like there's professional talent out there that is pivoted into making Roblox content because it's just, I don't know, more lucrative somehow. It's that which is disturbing in its own right. But as a result, it is, Roblox kind of just skims off the top, right? Like they run the servers, they run the way for you to find these games, but there is no like, I'm going to play Roblox. You're going to load up Roblox, and then you're going to launch into one of what they call them experiences, and then you're off doing some other thing. And that other thing can be a huge variety of things. There are a good number of first-person shooters, some of which are, like relatively high quality and don't look like Roblox, which a lot of Roblox looks kind of like a bootleg Lego kind of character sort of deal. But you can, if you're a creator creating something for Roblox, you can replace all of that stuff with different assets and whatever else. And a lot of idle games, a lot of obstacle courses or obbies, which are, just kind of like really bad platformers that seem like they're made by kids for kids, except for the part where they try to monetize the stuff. And that's where it got really crazy for me because, I was, roughly familiar with the concept of here's what Roblox is. And also, you buy Robux, and then you spend those Robux inside of those experiences, which might go away tomorrow because they're all user created and they can be kind of taken offline or like there was one that I had favorited that was currently offline because they were largely updating it or whatever. But like, there's no guarantee that the thing you spend money on is going to be around the following day, basically. But also the way some of that money is implemented. We played a fashion, I believe it was called Fashion Forward, where you could Basically, you had to dress up a certain way and then walk the runway. Fashion Famous, thank you. Fashion Famous. And there was a whole separate area with separate fancier clothing that you could only get if you purchased VIP access. Now, that's VIP access that only exists in this one game. It's not some blanket like, oh, I'm a VIP across all Roblox experiences. Like, no, it is specific to that game. So if you want to play Dress to Impress, a similar game, that access will almost certainly not carry over. First person shooters are, like there's no, I guess we're used to like the ways in which a lot of kind of games over the years, whether they've been free to play or $60 games or $70 games or whatever, the way that those games monetize and the lines that they kind of draw in terms of like, this is where it gets too gross. And generally speaking, that's in like, Call of Duty doesn't outright sell guns that you can't get another way, for example. They don't go and say, give us $8 for the most powerful gun. There is nothing stopping any of these Roblox experiences from doing that. And because they are either less sophisticated or less scrupulous, or they don't have to care about long-term franchise, like they don't care about like, oh, if we rip people off on guns this year, they're not going to buy next year's game, or, like whatever it is. Roblox experiences don't give a fuck, man. They're like, yeah, here, go buy this fucking laser gun. And anytime you use it, people in chat will complain that it is unbalanced. And is it unbalanced? Maybe not. But enough people complained that I was like, okay, this seems at least sketchy. Because of these games being mostly multiplayer experiences, like some of the obstacle courses, which are, again, I say obstacle course, but it's just like, here's a really shitty generic platformer with some, kind of enraging mechanics thrown in along the way to, give you a reason to have to respawn. The one I was playing had a function where if you walked up to another player, you could hit the E key to fling them. And I didn't know what that meant. I was like, does it fling? Am I flinging them off the side and making them restart like a kind of, is it like a trolling mechanic or something? And yes, it seems like that's exactly what it is. However, when I hit the button to do that to someone, it didn't fling them off. Instead, it popped up a little window saying, do you want to buy the ability to fling? Do you want to fling this guy? You need to pay us real money to do it. Just like a long list of things like that. There's a gardening game that is intensely popular. I believe is just called Grow a Garden. But anyway, it is kind of an idle game. You are planting seeds. The seeds are bearing fruit. You're selling the fruit. You're buying more seeds. Eventually you have a dinosaur. You know how it goes. You can run up to other people's gardens and try to steal stuff. And a thing highlighted saying, like, do you want to steal this guy's bamboo? And I'm like, hell yeah, I'm going to steal this guy's bamboo. You hit the steal button and it pops up a window saying, give us money. If you want to steal something, you've got to pay for it, which is like levels upon levels of who is stealing from who. Like it is mind blowing conceptually that's a thing. Even in the obstacle course, along with the flinging, occasionally it would like near a checkpoint, you would see like a magic carpet appear. And even if walking near it would cause do you want to buy a magic carpet? Push this button to buy the magic carpet. Which the magic carpet, I think, just lets you fly over all of the obstacle course and like win or whatever. Which seems like it kind of defeats the purpose. And that was just like that was like a couple hours of just like skimming around and looking at stuff and seeing that is, that concept of just like a bad microtransactions was pervasive enough that like that you're just like, oh, that's Roblox, I guess. And it was really eye-opening to see it in action. I think when we talk about Roblox, we talk about child safety and we talk about, predators on the platform. And, Roblox has been, I'm not going to say responsive. Like they actually did just have some updates recently to try to, update some of their safety stuff. but like, I don't know. It feels like no one is talking about the incessantly like microtransactive nature of most of these experiences. And to me, that was it was like a different level of exploitative than what you think of as the typical Roblox exploitation. It was like pop-up ads. It was just like everywhere you walk, and if you're playing with a controller, like it, and you had premium currency in your account, which I do not, it feels like that's like kind of a button press away, which seems like it would be very easy to accidentally spend some money that maybe you didn't intend to, especially if you're a little kid who wants to fling someone off the edge or steal someone's bamboo, I guess. I don't know. It was really nuts to see it. It's something that I find myself wanting to like stare at longer, because it is kind of unbelievable how far gone it is. Because again, I think, you hear like, oh, and it's got a lot of microtransactions. You're like, well, I know what that looks like because I've played a lot of pretty nasty phone games. I've played enough Genshin Impact to know what the shakedown looks like. And, hey, I've seen Infinity Nikki, so I know how this goes. Like, no, dude, in some ways it is a mix of like being way more brazen and like feeling more amateurish at the same time, where like a lot of their placement, you look at it and go like, I feel like that's not a best practice. Like if you really wanted to get people to spend money on it, you would do it this way and not this way. But it feels so lawless and without thought, because different people of different creators of different skill levels are making these things and whatever else, that it all just kind of it is all out there in the open, and it is in your face in a way that was shocking, I guess. Like it was surprising to see that is truly what Roblox is, I suppose. It is that has been with me for the last week or so since doing that, is that feeling of just like, dude, what is, if that is the most popular thing going for a demographic, for a younger demographic, if that is their exposure to video games, if that's the thing they're seeing and they're like, yeah, video games, oh, look out for this, don't spend money here, I'm gonna go ask mom if I can spend some money on this, I'm gonna harass my mom for some more Robux so I can, do this and that and whatever. I wouldn't want to go play a bunch of video games when I grew up. I don't think I would exit that ecosystem. I don't think I would age out of that ecosystem and go like, yes, I'm going to do more of this. It would be more like, oh God, I escaped the fucking trap. It was really, it feels pretty gross. It feels pretty gross. There are things in there that were like of a quality that you're like, oh wow, this is really interesting, that they were able to make a relatively modern looking first person shooter. I think, like at that point, I think where it sort of falls apart is I don't think the netcode is great, and there are things that kind of hold it back from just a multiplayer video game kind of perspective. But yes, then there is this larger ecosystem. A couple people in chat are bringing this up, that there is this kind of larger ecosystem that exists where you've got people that create junk in Roblox, and then they also run popular YouTube channels where they try to funnel kids towards the junk they make in Roblox. And it's all bad. I don't know. Like it's really that feels like a kind of a next level of predatory on this stuff that I guess I hadn't considered. Like it's a really crazy level, like the way that particular machine is built, the way that particular trap has been set and sprung of YouTube, like someone's likening it to the Counter-Strike skins thing. Like there is almost sort of a, okay, we're going to promote this thing that we know is like super predatory, but we're going to say it's the funnest game ever made. It's so funnest. It's the funnest. It's so much fun. You're gonna get in here. It's gonna be great, and push a bunch of kids towards it, which rises it up the charts, which makes it exposes it on more of the kind of Roblox interface to people who maybe aren't familiar with whatever YouTube. So like the layers of manipulation possible here feel I don't know, endless. I was shocked, and I guess I'm not surprised. Like I don't like it, it's tempting to look at it and think like, well, Roblox should have a firmer hand on how these monetization strategies are built and how this is, and then I think about it, go like, no, no, why would they? Why would they? Why would they do that? That is where the money is for them, Like, is it sleazy? Absolutely. But also Roblox is kind of a layer removed from it, where they can kind of fall back on a defense of like, well, we don't create the experiences, like they make this stuff. And, when something crosses some kind of line, they can step in and be like, oh, you guys with the money, well, yeah, that is a little too much. And it gives them a level of like, well, it's hard to moderate this really large platform. We're looking at it as we can, but and really kind of again kind of keep that shit at arm's length and just benefit and reap the rewards from every single transaction that takes place on the platform. It's as something that like is insanely popular with kids. It really feels I don't know, man. I don't want to be all sky is falling, whatever about it. But like you look at it and it looks like the end of things. You just look at it and be like, oh man, this is where it all falls apart. This is truly where this is where people get chewed up and spit out in a way that makes them never want to see a video game ever again. And this probably. In some way, this shouldn't be allowed to exist, but I can't necessarily point my finger at any one thing and say, here's where the law is, here's where they're going too far. It's just like all of it feels bad in terms of a sniff test or anything like that. Every single experience I tried failed it in one way or another, of just like, oh, like to the point where like I was loading stuff up and being like, oh, well, like, okay, what's this? Oh, where is it going to scumbag out on me and try to get me to spend money? Oh, right here. We found the point. We found the moment early on in the experience where they show you how it works and show you how popular it is, and then go like, why don't you spend a bunch of money right here? It's it's not great. And there are kids out there that are playing this thing and not spending a ton of money. I was talking to a friend, and she was talking about, she said her daughter plays Roblox sometimes. And I was and specifically plays the garden thing, like plays Grow a Garden. And I was like, oh, my eyes got wide. And I was like, really? And how much money have you given? And she said, like, oh, over the last 2 years, probably about $40. Like, okay. But she's got a big garden with a dinosaur in it and all of, whatever else is happening in there. And she's like, oh yeah, she plays it. She plays it on her phone. She plays this and whatever else. And I always break that money down in terms of like, okay, if this kid was playing other video game releases, blah, how much money, and $40 over 2 years, like $40 is not even one video game, right? So I look at it and go like, okay, all right. So, I guess I don't want to say that every single child is being exploited to death and making their families go broke in the process. But like you see where that can happen. You see where like, oh, if a thing, if this goes wrong, if this breaks bad, it gets real bad real fast. And parents have no idea what this thing is. Parents have no idea what this thing really is. because they're not engaged enough. They don't play enough video games themselves to know what the difference is of like, oh, Roblox is like this. Oh my God. Like it, even in my describing it to her, like, as I was talking to this parent and like about the stuff I saw in Grow a Garden about like, oh, and it pops up a thing where they want you to spend money here and spend money there. She was just like, oh, didn't really seem to understand that I was like, no, as someone who is familiar with video games and how a lot of them try to make their money, I'm telling you, this is like a 5-alarm fire. This is like you should probably try to figure out if this is like if there's a healthier way to something, right? It was very, yeah, my time with it was very shocking, and it definitely because I thought of it as like, well, yeah, I mean the thing you have to worry about is voice chat and weirdos trying to wire bus tickets to your children, and I was expecting that was going to be the big problem with Roblox, is that it was a scumbag factory. And I was like, you know what, I can, like, they will have enough parental controls in place that, if my kids get to a point where they want to play Roblox, because I was talking to another friend who, his son plays a lot of Roblox, and they play together, and it's a good family thing that they do, and it helps him as someone who is working in video games. It helps him understand what Roblox truly is. While also, being like a good kind of like, hey, I'm engaging in my son's hobbies and activities, and it's fun that we're playing together, and that's like valuable time, right? But like, I figured it was going to be the sex criminal thing, but instead I came away from it going like, I'm sure that's bad, right? I didn't. No one harassed me in the time I've spent on Roblox. No one has tried to wire me a bus ticket for whatever that's worth. But the other part of it, the way that a lot of the money is spent in that game and the way a lot of that stuff is built, led me to think like, I don't know that I want to. I don't know that I feel comfortable with my kids, and they're too young for it right now. But once they do kind of get their own devices, if they end up with a tablet or whatever, I don't know that I would feel comfortable letting them play Roblox unsupervised, and not for the reasons you would immediately suspect, but for the money things. And I would want to be able to talk to them about like, hey, like these are ripoffs, like these are scams, like these are. Like, it's fun, if you want to go in here and enjoy this thing, enjoy it. But like, don't ever think it's fair. Don't ever think it's, this is like a casino, but way worse, because you never win. You're not getting that money back. You're not going to hit some jackpot and Robux is going to fall out of it. It's it is you buying a gun in a game that isn't like inherently ephemeral. It is you buying a cool skin for a tiger in a game that might go away tomorrow. It is more insidious than the house always wins. It is that you are not even in the game in the first place. You are not in the real game to begin with, and yeah, it was, I was really taken aback by that. So I guess just We talked about Roblox from the angle of like, hey, I think that there is a battle coming that they will have to fight, and around the predatory nature of the community and voice chat and some of the other stuff that has happened there, right? And that was the stuff that you look at and maybe not so much right now, but a couple of years ago, talking about Roblox, it's like, okay, this is something where I think that there's going to have to be some regulation. Or something will have to change here, because this is too far, and now I think that that's twofold. I think that there's a completely different angle to this than I previously considered, where the games as they are designed on top of that is really are really kind of terrifying. In ways that then I look at stuff like Fortnite chasing after Roblox's success with the way that they rolled out a lot of their user created stuff and and looking at all of that and being like, oh my God, like you guys are just like racing to get a piece of this pie. Yeah, I don't know. Like it left me feeling bad about things. It left me feeling very like, oh man, like this is, and you know, there's some stuff we'll talk about in terms of like trends and demographic trends and what the kids are into according to IGN that we'll get into when we get into the news, that are kind of fascinating, as a kind of a corollary to my recent Roblox experience. It's a shame in some ways because I think like the platform is obviously very robust in ways that are like impressive and interesting to look at. You're like, wow, you wouldn't think that this stuff is all possible right here inside of this like weird nightmare. But yeah, man, it was real crazy. It was real crazy to see all of that. Let's take a break. We'll come back. We'll talk about Fumes after this. Where is your money going? Do you know? I mean, if so, awesome. But you know, it can be hard to keep track of all the money in, money out stuff happening. Where is your money going every month? What are you spending it on? Sometimes you wake up and you're like, man, my bank account. What? Okay, all right, we're waiting for this next check to come in. You know, it can be difficult at times to remember all of the different little things you signed up for and spent money here, spent money there on. Rocket Money is a great way to just kind of have a watchful eye glancing at your money and letting you know when it sees something a little bit out of the ordinary. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so that you can grow your savings. I just got a notification this morning. I had to pay like house insurance. Hey, congratulations. They didn't cancel my house insurance even after all of that water damage and everything. But the bill did go up a notable amount, and Rocket Money was like, "Hey, this bill is due, and it is like $1,100 more than it was last time." And I'm like, "Oh man, I should really see if I can do better on insurance." But also, it popped up a couple weeks ago, and it was like, "Hey, man, your phone bill is due, and we think we can maybe save you some money on it." And that's where Rocket Money really sings. You can say, yes, let's do this. Go in there, and you give it some details about your account, and they will go off and they will negotiate on your behalf with a lot of these different companies to try to get you a lower bill. And they came back and they saved me like $40. I was like, okay, that's cool. With a satellite radio bill, they saved me hundreds of dollars on that thing, because they charge $1 billion for satellite radio, and that's crazy. Rocket Money helped me out big time on that one as well. And and they'll let you know, like, hey, you got these other subscriptions. Are you still using it? These are the recurring charges that hit your account. Are they still valuable? There's nothing weird on there, and just kind of just a little poke here and there to just get more actively involved with your finances. And that's been handy. I feel more on top of that stuff than I did just looking over the credit card bills and looking at everything separately. Having it all assembled into one place, really, really handy. Rocket Money's 5 million members have saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, with members saving up to $740 a year when they use all of the app's premium features. So cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/JeffG today. That's rocketmoney.com/JeffG. rocketmoney.com/JeffG. I'm high on fumes right now. I'm proud to say I like the shiny stuff. Fumes is out on PC. Fumes is a car combat game. I am highly suspect of car combat games generally because I think that, They had their moment in time, and they sort of, I don't know. But Fumes actually is kind of doing some things with its controls that I think can work. Also, the way the game is laid out, it really helps with this. Fumes is kind of a deliberately retro-styled car combat kind of game. It is meant to look, sort of early PlayStation-ish with a level of filters and, bent CRT things on by default. You can turn that stuff off if you want, but they made some stylistic choices with some of those filters where like the color on it shifts when you hit turbo boost, and it looks kind of rad. So Fumes is kind of again, it's in early access. It seems very early in terms of like what there is to do and grow and progress through and all of that. That stuff seems a little that seems like the earliest, but the control that you have is really, really cool. So I'm playing with a controller. The controller button icons are not in this build all the way yet, and so it's constantly telling me to press F to move forward, and I'm like, what is that? Is that square? What they do is they put all of the car controls on the left side of the controller and all of the gun controls on the right side. And so the left stick steers, forward and back are on the triggers. It kind of takes a little bit to wrap your mind around. Like it's tricky, but it's like the level of control you kind of want out of a game like this. So like, L2 is forward, L1 is backwards. And then on the right side, you have camera control, and you also have like 2 gun points. And so R2 is kind of your main gun, and R1 is kind of an alternate, like another weapon on your thing. Now, much like something like a Car Wars or an Auto Duel or something, like you have mount points, or like Interstate 76 in a sense. Like you have literal mount points on the car, and you can go in and configure the car to your liking. You will unlock more parts and chassis and things like that as you go. But like when you mount a gun on the roof of your car, it is inherently a 360-degree weapon. It seems like, maybe that's weapon specific and not mount point specific, but basically, like, you have a 360-degree, rotating gun, and then also the front mount point on the hood of the car kind of has a 180-degree spread. And so it can only fire off to the side and in front of you. It can't really fire behind you because it just doesn't rotate, because it would shoot the cockpit of the car. And, there's a common sense aspect to that, I suppose. And so it creates this mix of like, okay, I can just use the right stick to rotate the camera behind me. The game is set in a massive, open, like empty environment, which, maybe we'll need to have more in it at some point. But for the purposes of like, I'm going to be looking behind me for the next 3 minutes, or let's say 45 seconds. You need that kind of open environment, right? So I'm looking behind me. I'm aiming at these enemies. I'm hitting them with the machine gun. But then also occasionally I need to kind of come about like it was boat combat and I was launching cannonballs. I occasionally need to expose my side to them so that I can launch the front-mounted, the heavier, like packing more of a punch weapon, and knock them out in like 1 or 2 hits from that. And so it is this mix of like, okay, they're in front of me and I can hit them with both weapons. Oh, I'm passing them, so I need to rotate around and I can still kind of shoot at them. And then like, okay, I can kind of get them. If I let them catch up, or I get like right up alongside them, I can now hit them with this stuff too. And it gives it that kind of I-76 or like Mech Warrior like idea of like, you need to think about the way that your car is actually laid out and the way the weapons are placed on your car. It gives it just a tiny smidge of that. I'm not saying that this is some simulator or like the car bounces around like crazy. It's super fast. It is arcadey as fuck. But with that little bit of thought in it, it takes it to a much higher level than it would be otherwise. Like there's another level of depth to car customization here that is kind of what I want out of this, as someone who liked Interstate 76 and you know, the way that it was Mech Warrior with cars. There is just a little bit of that, a smidge on the customization that makes this feel like it is a set apart from what you think of as the kind of the typical kind of car combat game. Like, they're not trying to make the next Twisted Metal. It's not that game. Instead, it's more of a, you know, kind of deliberately referential to Mad Max kind of thing, with this interesting kind of retro look to it. And then the game itself is the part that I am maybe the least like aware of, even after playing it. But like, so as you know, you will see on your radar, you will see little explosion icons. When you go there, you will find a fight, and you'll fight off 3 waves of cars. Your car recovers health really quickly, and so it's really just about like not exposing yourself to sustained fire if you want to stay alive. If you back off long enough, you'll heal the damage and kind of go on as normal. And so you'll fight off a few waves of cars and end up getting like a piece of cargo. And then I think from there, it's kind of like it's faction based. Like, there are a bunch of different factions in the world, and they have bases. One of the bases is just a giant tornado, and you go up to the base and you honk your horn, and you can deliver cargo. I think you can deliver it to anyone. I don't think you were getting specific missions, at least in the part of the game that I was playing. It seems like you can kind of just like take those deliveries. Okay, later on you can, maybe when those people are not hostile to you, you can take on traditional missions from them. But like where I was at, I was hostile to all these factions. So I was like, okay, well, it wants me to deliver 15 packages to them. Maybe after I do that, then something will change. But like it was very much like, I got this cargo, I dropped it off here, and then it said I did 1 of 15 there, and then I can go out and fight some more. When you die, there is some kind of mystical component to this or something. But when your car blows up, there are fumes. There's a cloud of smoke that you see drifting across the landscape, and eventually encircling another car, and then you become that car. So it's like they're like how they kind of handle death as a concept, which is like maybe a little goofy, but actually stylistically kind of awesome. But for me, it really comes down to that level of control and seeing what appears to be a good level of customization, especially as you're like, you know, getting access to kind of different types of cars that presumably would have different mount points and ways for you to kind of configure the weapons on a vehicle and whatever else. So you're finding like, you know, monster tires and, you know, or better suspension, and you know, even if you find like multiple copies of the same item, you can merge them together to increase the stats on it. And so it seems like there's just kind of a lot on that end of it, or a lot of potential, I guess I should say, on that end of it. Because again, it's early access. Fumes feels early in some ways. There is a demo available also if you're just looking to kind of wrap your controller around this a little bit and see what's up. But I was like very, very impressed with it. I came away from it going like, man, if this is something, like if they keep going on this track and actually, you know, really build a lot of this stuff out, and I think that there's a potential for a ton of systems and things here that, again, don't necessarily detract from the high speed arcadey kind of nature of the game itself, but things that like give you a cool level of control over what your car is and does as you're going through this world and taking on, you know, like you eventually can fight bosses and everything. There's, when you find the upgrade via the place where you upgrade your car, it is a gigantic car roving the landscape with a ramp down the back of it, and you pull up behind it, honk your horn, and then drive up into it. It's really fucking neat in a lot of ways. And I hope that they have a good, I hope that they add a lot to it over the course of early access and kind of keep building in that direction, because I think there's There's something to the way it feels that, again, I think if you're looking for like Twisted Metal, or if you're excited about like kind of that traditional car combat, this is not that. This is better than that. This is, I think, in a lot of ways, control wise, it would have been neat to see some of those games get to this point instead of the kind of hard mounted weapons and some of because being able to rotate the right stick around and stuff and aim in different directions is tricky, especially in a smaller arena, which is, Twisted Metal. We're not always the largest areas in the world, but it's what solves the problem of like, oh, I've got to do like a 3-point turn so that my guns can hit this guy because they only fire straight forward or straight back or straight, like the cones of fire, the radius on a lot of the weapons in Twisted Metal is practically non-existent. And those games always kind of sucked, like they were neat at a very specific time, but so limiting in what you or what they asked of you. I think was this solves it. The in a lot of ways, the kind of 360, rotating around, aiming. You could almost envision a 2-player mode here where you go full Lucky and Wild, and just another player is manning the turrets or whatever as you try to drive, and that might be kind of cool in a weird way. But yeah, I don't know. That's whatever. That point being is, I think if you're looking for something that is specifically, aping Twisted Metal or Vigilante 8 or whatever, like this is not that. This feels like a much more kind of high speed take on the a very arcadey, very filtered kind of take on, like something maybe more akin to I-76 but that's a bad comparison to make. I don't want that's, hopefully that makes sense to you. I'm not saying that this game is a simulator, because I-76 was much more in the vein of like, it was, hey, we took the MechWarrior engine and applied it to straight up cars. It's a very different kind of thing, but anyway, Fumes is really interesting. It is in early access now. There's a demo. You should check it out. It's neat. I hope that they continue building on it successfully, because it seems like something with a whole lot of potential. I also played some Shadow Labyrinth, and I didn't play a ton of it, and I don't know that I want to play any more of it. Shadow Labyrinth is the search action game where Pac-Man follows you around as a mag, and you have, kind of a 3-hit combo with a sword, like you're, some kind of shadow dude, and you have a sword, and there's stun meters and HP meters. It's a side-scrolling, it's a side-scrolling search action game in the vein of all of that other stuff. But also it is kind of also Pac-Man is there, and there are weird parts of like where you can get on the D line, which is like certain ground that looks a little bit more like the walls of a Pac-Man maze. As soon as you touch it, you just turn into Pac-Man, and you can go along these surfaces. And so you can kind of jump from surface to surface as Pac-Man. And that's how you can kind of stick to ceilings and roll around to the top. And then they put dots, they put the currency, the upgrade currency around the edges of it. And Pac-Man eats the dots, and then you have more upgrade currency. And it's a really... That seems like something that should be really cool. It seems like something that should be like fun and interesting, and it's just not. Like it just feels like a pretty bad Metroidvania. A lot of the combat, I think, feels very stiff. Like it's just a real slog to just kind of get around. And I'm sure that there are upgrades that you get that maybe mitigate some of those systems because of the very type of game that it is. But in the early going, it is like it hit a point of like, oh man, I don't want to do this anymore. Like really quickly, like 40 minutes in, I was like, man, I just this feels wrong. This doesn't feel good, and it doesn't feel like fun. Like they're trying to create a mystery around, like, you know, your Pac-Man guy that is following you around is the only character that talks early on. You know, the boss characters and other characters that you find, they also will talk. It is all written dialogue. They don't have, it's not voiced. And it's sort of like, you know, the Pac-Man is waking you up because he needs to find a ghost body to help him collect this sword so that he can fight this way out of this prison. And then from there, it, you know, you get out of the prison and you do all of this other stuff. And they based what is it? Was it the Netflix show? Was that a Netflix show or an Amazon show? Whatever it was, the streaming series Secret Level, where they did one episode that was about Conquered. And they did kind of like different episodes about different video games. One of them was about this, which is weird in its own way. I guess I just feel like this is, Easy Peasy says Shadow Labyrinth is also a bad name if you're trying to attract Pac-Man fans. This is not a game for Pac-Man fans. If you're like, I like Pac-Man, this is not like you'll find some stuff vaguely like Pac-Man sandwiched in the middle of all this, but it is not scratching some itch where you're like, I love Pac-Man and finally a new Pac-Man game. Like it is not that. It is a search action game for people who want a bad take on Shadow Complex or, you know, Symphony of the Night or Axiom Verge. If you want a bad one of those, you're in luck. Shadow Labyrinth is here. Yeah, I don't know. I think a lot of that combat feels pretty bad, and that is kind of where it stops for me, because like there is some part of me that would be interested to see like more and more of like, what did they do to Pac-Man? Like that is the only draw here, I think. But I don't think that, at least out of the gate, they're not taking good advantage of that stuff. They're not like hiding it per se either, because in the first hour, like you see the character, you look at him, you go, oh, that's Pac-Man. The title screen, in the center of the title screen is a little Pac-Man maze. So it's not like they're like, oh, by the way, this is set in the Pac-Man universe. I think the more shocking thing is I think they do try to tie it into the larger, my understanding is that they do try to tie it into the larger kind of Namco timeline with the GAMP. Like there's like, I think there is mild Xevious stuff in here, I think is the thing about it. But which is cool as someone who likes that they wrote a bunch of insane lore for Xevious and whatever else. But I don't know. This seems like something where I would much rather just read a Wikipedia page and go, huh, instead of like playing through this game, because the combat itself and the movement and everything else just doesn't feel good. So that's my problem with it. I've seen it. It seems like people generally are similarly put off by a lot of the game itself. But I appreciate that it exists, I guess. I can't help but appreciate that this was an idea that they had and they decided to greenlight it. I will say on some level, the idea that they greenlight something like this but won't make a new fucking Ridge Racer is disgusting. The idea that this is a game, they're like, yeah, no, make the weird Pac-Man thing. And they're like, oh, you want to make a new Ace Combat? Yeah, go fuck yourself. We're too busy working on this. Like, ugh. But there you have it. A weird, like, I appreciate that it is a very weird thing. I guess like that's kind of the only thing I can really say about it. Is that I wish it was a better game. If this the core feel of it, the core mechanics of it out of the gate felt better, it would be a much easier thing to recommend. You go like, it's workmanlike, but at least it's a weird Pac-Man thing. Instead, it's like, hey, do you want to suffer through this kind of unkind, uninteresting set of ideas to maybe see some silly Pac-Man stuff? Like, the temptation is still there, make no mistake, but yeah, certainly hard to recommend, that's for sure. Other than that, we rolled credits on We Love Katamari over here, which my son didn't really understand when I started loading levels back up for him, because it kind of unlocks new challenges for the same levels. He got really, he was like, we did this level already. I'm like, no, this is a different, I mean, we've seen them all, buddy. Like, we've finished it. This is it. Like, he didn't understand the idea of the game being over, and there not being more to see. And I'm like, okay, like there's another one. We could go get that and play more there. But I was also surprised by just how short it is in terms of but where it decides to throw the credits, was like relatively early in the grand scheme of things. It felt like we had maybe played a couple hours of it, and then I was like, oh, it's done? Jesus, what the fuck? And then it's like, okay, now go back to all these characters on this map and talk to them again, and then you can do another quest, another task in the same level. All I really want out of a Katamari game at the end of it is I want every level to pop up and say, like, now go back in here and roll up 100% of everything and take your time. That's all I really want to do. Is I feel like that there should be a free mode or something where just like, let me back in here and let me just roll, baby. I just want to like get all this shit. I just want to roll up all of it. And they hide all of that, and it's all, just, it's super deep down a rabbit hole, and the menu in that game is fucking terrible anyway. So that's a little frustrating. We're playing through. We're still playing some Donkey Kong Bonanza, and that has cooled off a little bit because the kids just haven't asked for it, and I haven't had time to charge through the rest of it on my own as much as I want to. I thought I would kind of wait for them to play it. But yeah, I don't know. We got to the snow and lava area in the game, and they were very excited about becoming a zebra, and then it kind of stopped talking about it, and it just kind of stopped coming up, and we started playing outside again a lot more over the last week. But yeah, I don't know. Donkey Kong Bonanza is still, I'm still having a really good time with it. What I have played of it, we haven't played much of it since the last time, since the last time we spoke. I did see some of the later parts of that game and found myself, it's a missed opportunity. They had the opportunity to really pivot on this thing and go really wild in some different directions, and they chicken out in the last bits of the game in ways that kind of rub me the wrong way, having seen that stuff. But whatever. Let's get into the news. Microsoft. That's it. Microsoft saw the error of their ways. Microsoft realized they got suckered. Microsoft read the wrong tea leaves. Microsoft thought things were going one way and made some calls that now they are unmaking. Microsoft has announced that The Outer Worlds 2 will now launch at a price of $70 instead of $80. VideoGamesChronicle.com has a quote from an Xbox spokesperson that says, "We're focused on bringing players incredible worlds to explore, and we'll keep our full-price holiday releases, including The Outer Worlds 2, at $69.99 in line with current market conditions." And then the thing they posted on social media was more, in-world from Obsidian. "We have received your SOS via Skip Drone about the pricing. As an organization devoted to making sure that corporations do not go unfettered, we at the Earth Directorate have worked with Redacted to revise the price of The Outer Worlds 2, blah, 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 blah." So yeah, this is, we talked about this at the time. This is from some conversations I had at the time, that like the $80 thing was not something that was, when Nintendo priced Mario Kart at $80 and then also priced Donkey Kong at $70, I think the message they were intending to send there was strictly, you should buy the bundle. What a great value the Nintendo Switch 2 bundle is, because this game is $80. I don't think that Nintendo was ever intending to move prices across the board forward to $80. In fact, I know that to be the case. They were not intending for games to be $80 across the board. Now some, publishers and, you saw some quotes out of some third parties that were like, okay, yeah, we're going to look at this and we'll be open to this idea. And I think behind closed doors, you had some publishers who were like, because what was it? Sony took the hit for the move to 70, right? They were the first ones to go from 60 to 70. Is that right? And then so Sony took that hit for the industry. They maybe weren't intending to take that hit for the industry at the time, but the rest of the industry was like, "Oh, sick, dog. They did it. Everyone hates them. By the time the dust clears and we raise our price up another $10, it'll be a done deal. Everyone spent all their time getting mad at them." I think that the idea there was that people were looking at it and going like, "Oh, it's really cool of Nintendo to do this." like, "Oh, it's cool that they're going to take the hit on this $80 thing, and then we'll be able to kind of duck in behind them and charge that for our games, and everyone will be over it by the time our game comes out, and we'll just be able to charge $80 for it." I think between a mix of people, like the reaction to $80 has been obvious. The reaction to this price increase was overwhelmingly like, yeah, no shit. But the reaction to the $80 price bump, I think, was like overwhelmingly negative in a way that maybe some people didn't expect. But also, it was never the intent. They were not. Nintendo was not trying to open the door for all of their games to be $80. They were looking at, market conditions around the world. They were looking at the price of a bundle, which is obviously a very unique value proposition compared to the standard kind of game sale. Like, they were not approaching this as like, the time is now, everything's $80. Microsoft seemingly took some bait on that one and went, "Oh, fuck yeah. Outer Worlds 2, that's $80. And everyone at the time was like, "Are you fucking out of here? This is where you're..." I wonder if their pre-orders across all platforms are just like in the shitter, and that this is part of what drove them to pull back on it, or we don't really know. But like this again, they kind of fell for it a little bit. This was not supposed to. That this was never kind of supposed to be the intent. No one has materialized around them. Borderlands backed off, after some like back and forth of like, will he or won't he Randy Pitchford Twitter business. No one else showed up to say our game is $80 too. It was literally just It literally just Microsoft with Outer Worlds 2. So sensible that they backed off. But this is something they probably should not have done in the first place. We'll see where this kind of goes from here. I do think that, like, you know, for the right game, for the right moment, there are probably times where they can say, oh, yeah, we're going to charge you $80 for this other thing down the line, or, you know, maybe this, you know, big online game, you know, Mason in the chat says, I think Battlefield's going to be $80. That's possible. I know that there were some leaks around, like, different versions of that game, right, with pricing. Sure, you know, like, do they charge $80 for GTA 6? Like, by the time GTA 6 comes out, like, maybe that will seem, maybe one or two more games will have tried to go out at 80. But I think Battlefield, you know, you talk about, like, what is the base price for Battlefield? I don't think they need to do $80 because they will instead do what publishers have been doing for the past several years. They will say, here's our $70 game, but you really want to buy the $120 version because it lets you play 3 days earlier than everyone else. And plus it gives you these incredibly sick fucking skins for these guns. And you will get a cool helmet that says, I was there on it. You will get the I was there helmet. You were there on day -3 when the servers were at their worst. Congratulations. You paid for the best version of the game. You are truly a tier 1 operator. You will get a sick beard. You will be able to install sick beard. What are you talking about? And you will be able to play this video game. Like, that, I think, is a far more compelling offering, and letting players do it to themselves while still saying, here's a $70 version of the game for people who are on the fence seems like an insane way to describe that. But for players who are like, I'm into this, but I'm price sensitive about it. I'm not, like, crazy. Like, let's play some Battlefield, but I don't need a cool beard and skins. I think that is the right way to do it. And I think that that's something that a Grand Theft Auto could also benefit from and get away with. Like, certainly there will be different versions of GTA 6, right? You'll have some physical version of the game that will come with a crime item. Here you go. It's a bottle opener shaped like a crocodile, but also if you take the tail off the crocodile, it's a knife. Can we get away with putting that? Can we get away with packing that in with an M-rated game? Could we, you know, is that something we could do? I would use that. I would hide that from my kids. I think that's again, as someone who has none of the numbers in front of him, I do think that, like, having a variety of price points is a smarter way to go about this, because the people who are true fans, and I'm the biggest fan, and I bought the expensive version of the game, and whatever else, like, those people are lining up to be suckered. They want that shit. They want those hot skins. They want that season of DLC already. They want it day one. They want the hat that says, I paid the most for this game that they would allow me to pay. And more power to them, right? I mean, they should do that. I don't think you need to raise the base price up to $80. I don't think that benefits anyone. I think that crosses. I think seeing this price reversal on Outer Worlds 2, I think that says to me that, like, you know, hey, yeah, there's a line was crossed. Like, this is people decided that $80 sounded like too much money in a way that they somehow didn't when $70 was the number being bandied about. People still had $70 back then. Now no one has $80, and they're not standing for it. But yeah, this seems like, you know, from the outset, this seemed like the wrong game to do that with in the first place. And I think if you want to try to push an $80 agenda, And Nintendo is maybe less able to do this than others, but I think if you want to find games that you can use to kick open the $80 door, ironically, it probably does end up being the more multiplayer focused games, because you can, like, I think players can justify it to themselves as like, well, I'm going to play this game for hundreds of hours, as opposed to Outer Worlds 2, which players are going to play for 30 hours, like what's how long is that game? I don't know. But like, you're going to play that game once and it'll probably, like considering what the first game was like and the run that Obsidian has been on, and I think they're very aware of some of the shortcomings of the previous game. I think Outer Worlds 2 stands a chance to be a hell of a fucking video game. I am very much looking forward to it. So don't take this as like me shitting on it somehow, but the math is fundamentally different for single player only stuff and whatever else. Like if Activision came around and said like, hey, the base price of Call of Duty is $80, I think that would be dumb. But also I think that like that is the audience that would most begrudgingly be like, all right, what else am I going to do? Am I going to reinstall Roblox? Like, no, they would probably still buy the game just fine. But at the end of the day, those are the players who are also just going to upgrade to the more expensive versions of the game. And I don't think making the base entry level product $80, I don't think that changes the math. You think like, oh, well, do you have a situation where if the baseline is $80, does that funnel more people into the more expensive editions because they're more likely to say, well, I'm spending $80, I might as well spend $140? Like, does it? I don't know that necessarily nets out. Again, as not an economist, there's only so much I can say here. But I do, kind of, when I think about, how games have sold at some of these various price points and some of the reactions we've seen to price increases in the past, this one felt like the wrong time for the industry at large. And this felt like a weird one-off thing that Nintendo can get away with at launch because no one's buying that standalone copy of Mario Kart anyway. If they are, it's because they already got fucked over once and messed up getting the bundle. And so there you go. Market forces, blah, 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 blah. Now, there will come a time, and I think they tried to say back at launch that this bundle was not going to last. Kind of implying that maybe by the time we get to the holiday season that you will not see the Mario Kart bundle on shelves anymore. I don't know that I believe that. With the way the launch has gone and the way that it is sold as well as it is sold, if they can get more into the nation and into the country and whatever else, then I could see them still doing that. They are going to do a Pokemon bundle as well. And so maybe that becomes the holiday bundle and they do change it out for that. Which I personally find incredibly unattractive. As someone who has very little interest in a Pokemon game, I think Mario Kart has whatever. Pokemon is very popular. But I do think Mario Kart does have a wider appeal. At this point, it is their best selling franchise for generations. So I think the math backs that up a little bit. Back in June, this is again from the videogameschronicle.com report on this, when they announced the price to begin with for Outer Worlds 2, we understand that these changes are challenging and they were made with careful consideration given market conditions and the rising cost of development. Looking ahead, we continue to focus on offering more ways to play more games across any screen and ensuring value for Xbox players. I think the thing that Microsoft has going for it on any kind of price fight is that any kind of weird price stuff they do with their games, now that their games are all multi-platform, that stuff ends up benefiting, or it ends up making Game Pass seem like a better deal, right? Like, oh, Outer Worlds 2 is $80. Like, I could buy that on PlayStation for $80, or I could sign up for Game Pass and play it on Xbox or PC or wherever, whatever other Xboxes I have in my home. But I think that that's only theoretical, because I think if that worked, if the idea of this game costs money, so instead I signed up for Game Pass, worked across platforms, then Xbox hardware would theoretically be in a better position than it is, and all of that other stuff that never really materialized for them. So, I don't think raising the price to $80 ends up being a massive benefit to Game Pass outside of people who already own an Xbox or already subscribe to Game Pass or whatever, right? We talked about this a little bit on the bonus show, because it happened in the middle of all of that, I believe. I guess maybe this happened in the middle of the show last week. There's really not much to say here other than they are still they are sticking to this Splitgate 2 stuff. The quote is that they are unlaunching the game, and they are going to take Splitgate 1 offline. No one's really dug into the math on that. They said running servers for Splitgate 1 costs them hundreds of thousands of dollars, which I'm sure lifetime to date is true. But the idea of like the player count that game seems to have, I can't imagine it would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to, well, I don't know, whatever. I'm no engineer. Maybe they engineered it poorly and it does not scale or something, but their stuff on Splitgate 2, they say, we launched too early, we had ambitious goals, and our excitement to share it with you, we bit off more than we could chew, we rushed certain features, made some boneheaded mistakes, and most importantly, we didn't give you the polished, portal-filled mayhem you fell in love with. And so they're going to stop, major updates to Splitgate 2. It will stay online, but they are going to lay a bunch of people off and then shut down Splitgate 1, and then try to make Splitgate 2 better. You will remember that that they got out on stage at the Summer Game Fest, and the guy at the head of this company ran his mouth about the quality of other first-person shooters and all of this other stuff, and then basically said, "Here's a battle royale mode." And I can't think of a fucking dumber way to go, especially I can't think of a fucking like dumber way to position your game. Like, forget, like, he was also wearing a fucking hat that said like "make FPS great again," which is already like a next level of fucking like oblivious and stupid to be doing. But then to like the way it all came together is like it feels like a B plot from that show, from the Ubisoft show about game development. It feels like something that would be in the middle of all of that, and you'd be like, what's fucking hilarious. No one would ever do that. Yeah, that dude seems like a real fucking dumbass in the wake of, like, in the middle of all that, not even in the wake of it. Like, you look at it and go like, yeah, I don't know, like, yeah, like Splitgate 2 was already divisive to the community of players who liked Splitgate 1, which was a game that you kind of already cut off support to in order to make Splitgate 2, and now you're saying we're going to cut off support to Splitgate 2 while we finish Splitgate 2 so that we can relaunch it. And I don't think that any of that works. I don't think that like, they had one shot and they missed their chance to blow. This is it, man. Like, they already kind of got some benefit of the doubt when Splitgate 1 took off and was like weirdly popular, because it came out at a very great time for a Halo-like game to hit, because it was pre-Halo Infinite. It was like people wanted a game that ran at that pace and moved at that speed, like all of that. And the portals were fun as well. At the time, they said, hey, like, this game is really popular, but like, we kind of made some choices in engineering Splitgate 1 that make it really hard for us to achieve the goals we want to reach, and that players want us to, like, the things that players want us to do to support this game. It's going to be easier for us to go and make Splitgate 2. instead of supporting Splitgate 1, which is a huge risky thing. But they went out and raised a bunch of money, oh, by the way, in the middle of all this to go fund Splitgate 2. And so that, I think that's a very high risk transaction. But like, again, because they kind of struck gold and seemed scrappy, I think there was an element of that. I was like, okay, well, let's see how it goes. These guys, you know, if Splitgate 2 really builds on this stuff and they are smart about it, then maybe. And so when Splitgate 2 finally came back around, it was like, okay, there's something here. There's something interesting here. Like, there's some changes here, and some Splitgate fans are really put off by it. But, you know, like, there's still something in their beta in kind of the months leading up to the Summer Game Fest. And then at Summer Game Fest, they said, the game's out now. And then here's Imagine Dragons, you know, like they had like this whack trailer. They have the guy get on a stage and like fucking shoot his game in the head and announce a fucking battle royale mode that no one playing that game would want. Like, the appeal of that game is that it was appealing to people who like kind of old school Halo, you know, like trying to roll out a battle royale, the most overworked subgenre of shooter on the planet. Like, trying to work that into your thing is the antithesis of what people want. When people trusted that studio to go away and make a sequel, this is the exact opposite of what those players wanted. And if I feel like if you couldn't see that from a mile away, you never understood what your game was in the first place, you know? Like, or why people were interested in it to begin with, you know? Like, if you thought that you could just go like, oh yeah, battle royale's hot, we can make one of those. Like, you've missed the window on that. Like, in terms of like player excitement, you've missed the window on that by a matter of years. And just like flabbergasting that was the direction that they were going to try to pivot this thing in, with like whatever goodwill they had built up. And so now, on the other end of all of that, to try to be, you know, red hat in hand, be like, oh gosh, guys, gee willikers, we're gonna, you know, it's a rough road, and we owe you something better, so we're laying a bunch of people off, and we're gonna try to fix the game. Like, you are multiversed out. You are out of chances. It is impossible for me to see, unless that game launches and is the fucking hottest shit you have ever fucking seen. If that team manages to put together a game that really does put other shooters to shame, they're going to have to dig themselves out of this hole. It is very difficult because, you know, Splitgate 2 was not on like an amazing track in terms of player numbers and whatever else. Like, it was not retaining people the same way the first game seemed to. Mind-blowing that this is the approach for them. And it's a shame because there are still people who are working on this thing, and I think there are bits and pieces of it that you look at and go like, yeah, there's certainly something here. But to try to thread this needle a second time, now on the other side of the player goodwill meter, like coming out of Splitgate 1, I think, you know, there were people who were like, oh, I really like Splitgate, and I'm pulling for Splitgate 2. I really hope that those guys do something cool. There's something here. Now they're on the other end of it, like, oh, these guys really fucked up. These guys really shit the bed, didn't they? Wow, what a colossal fucking miscalculation. Oh, they're going to try and redo this? Jesus Christ. Like, the goodwill is gone. And without that, it's very, like, the idea of bringing those early adopters, bringing those players back that liked Splitgate 1, I'm not going to say that's impossible, but that is a death mark. That is an uphill battle all the way. Like, that is a really crazy turn of events here. So it is hard to believe in that at all. Something that's very easy to believe, though, is the idea of Tencent ripping off other video games for video games that they themselves are making. That is what Sony is accusing Tencent of, according to Reuters. The headline here, Sony sues Tencent for allegedly ripping off the Horizon video games. Tencent announced and showed off a game called Light of Motoram, which players looked at a lot of that art and said, wow, you guys are making a fucking bootleg Horizon Zero Dawn game, aren't you? Wow, man, China don't care, do they? Sony decided that they agreed with that because apparently Tencent and Sony were in some loose talks at one point for Tencent to make an actual licensed Horizon game. And so when that deal fell apart, apparently, from the looks of things, Tencent just kept going. They said, like, I don't know, we'll put a bow in her hair, we'll do something to change it. And so this game looks like a real artistically very similar to the kind of key art and some of the other elements that I think have become very well known as a part of the Horizon Zero Dawn franchise. According to Reuters, in the lawsuit that Sony filed last week, Light of Motoram is a slavish clone of its game that copies several distinctive Horizon elements and threatens to confuse buyers. And also said in the complaint that they declined an offer from Tencent to collaborate on a new Horizon game last year. And Sony is claiming that the announced Light of Motoram features identical gameplay, story themes, and artistic elements to Horizon, as well as many other similarities. They've also cited coverage of Light of Motoram from video game journalists, including someone out there who referred to the game as Horizon Zero Originality, which is funny. Whoever wrote that, good shit. Sony has asked for monetary damages as well as an order blocking Tencent from violating its intellectual property rights. We'll see how that goes. But yeah, with this coming out of Sony having announced, or rather Sony having confirmed that yes, they talked to Tencent about maybe doing something and didn't, and then this being the aftermath of it, that doesn't look great. That doesn't look great on Tencent's part. I just got an email in my inbox. I have a campaign opportunity for you from Roblox to promote on your Twitch stream. They're offering a guaranteed base rate of $485 plus a bonus payout that is triggered by viewers completing objectives. You could earn up to a total of $10,375 through reaching the campaign goals. This campaign is first come, first served due to limited availability. If interested, your next step, this is all, okay, I get a lot of these for a lot of different products and services and whatever else. And they all come down to this, which is the most scam ass, like everything about, and all this stuff a lot of this stuff comes from Stream Elements, which is a company that, they make a shitty, like they took OBS and put a bunch of shitty layers over the top of it to make it worse. It's real cool. And they do a lot of, they facilitate a lot of stream advertising. Like a lot of the stuff is even built into Twitch. Like Twitch partnered with Stream Elements, so you can find it in Twitch or whatever to take some of these deals. And some of them are for like similar stuff you might hear advertised on a podcast, food to your door and some of that. But like the games ones always seem the most scammy. Anyway, all of them come down to this sentence, which I find insane from a like working arrangement kind of thing. That it just makes it seem like the shadiest thing possible. If interested, your next step is to join my exclusive campaign management Discord server so that we can discuss the details. Don't worry if it looks empty when you first arrive. I'll personally assign you the necessary roles and create your dedicated channel within 24 working hours. Like, what? You want to do professional business with me and you're only willing to do it over Discord? That sounds like a fucking scam. If I didn't know that Stream Elements was actually a company that at one point had employed people that I knew, I would think you are fucking running straight scams. Like what? Just say, hey, if you're interested, write back to me. If you're interested, hey, give me a call. Hey, let's hop on the phone and talk about this like actual fucking professionals. What the fuck? It's so insane. The entire ecosystem around sponsored streams is so fucking mind-blowing, man. Anyway, That would be very funny if I started doing sponsored Roblox. Roblox is really, you should all sign up right now, and if enough of you sign up, I will get paid more money. Like, yeah, performance marketing for Roblox installs. This is where the real money is. Yes, and the answer is yes. That I think, but I think that that's really infantile, I guess. I don't know. So the idea is like, oh, they're doing this on Discord because all these streamers are kids and they don't want to get on the phone and they don't want to do this and they're all super young and they don't, this is how they talk anyway. And I think that is I think not treating these people like proper adults running a proper business and being like, hop on Discord, bud, we're gonna all get paid, I think is scumbag behavior. I think is some straight up fucking like Scooter Braun level fucking like, I don't know, like it is just, it is the same type of racket of like esports and just like the way that kids get taken advantage of in any kind of talent based field, be it music, or streaming or whatever. Like I think there's a lot of industry snakes out there, man. You want to be a stream superstar, live large. IGN, the Imagine Games Network, your friends over at Snowball, they have launched a new sub-site that they are calling Gaming Trends, and this is something that they are aiming at advertisers. This is something that if you're running some kind of campaign and you want to know what are the kids into, IGN has put together a series of reports and things that you can get access to and get your hands on as an advertiser to let you know more about kind of what those kids are into. As a part of that, they have kind of released a little bit of the information that it's behind a sign up. I don't think there's a paywall per se, but I do think it is primarily designed for if you are an advertiser looking to kind of build campaigns. But gamesindustry.biz, which is also owned by IGN, has done a write-up about this thing with some of the details in it. And so they refer to Gaming Trends as a data-driven insights platform that utilizes the company's vast reach to predict the future direction of gaming and entertainment. So in short, that this is not something that is new. This is something, GameSpot still, I think, runs GameSpot tracks. Does tracks.gamespot.com go anywhere still? Does that still exist? I have to know. Sorry. No, it doesn't. Wow. Did they shut down GameSpot? No one wanted it anymore anyway. Anyway, so this is something, IGN gets a lot of traffic to its pages, or more traffic than anyone else in its space. I don't know that we would call it a lot anymore based on how people consume information and social media and all this other stuff, but I'm sure they try to wrap some of that in as well, because they're smart. But they do say that they have 500 million monthly visitors across 110 countries over at IGN. So they're kind of using that to try to pull together information around trends in gaming, demographics, and what have you. So in light of us talking about Roblox, some of this stuff kind of stuck out to me. In terms of gamesindustry.biz's write-up of some of these details, they note that, hey, younger players use phones. 93% of Generation Alpha prefer playing on mobile, according to an IGN segmentation study, and that mobile preference is growing for millennials as well, with 32% calling it their preferred device. Says here, the study also asserts that Fortnite has been a key factor in the Nintendo Switch's success, which is, I think, that's something that we had kind of talked about a little bit. The idea of like, as Fortnite was pulled from phones, it probably led to a boost in Nintendo Switch usage, if not sales, because that was the kind of next cheapest device you could get that could run Fortnite. I feel like all the kids that I know that would have been playing Fortnite on phones all suddenly had Switches. And now they've all gone back to phones. If that tells you anything, I don't know what. Probably tells you something. Daily concurrent user numbers have grown in Roblox. Again, this is according to IGN. In June of 2022, daily concurrence for Roblox 3.8 million. June 2025, over 25 million. Fortnite, as a comparison point, has grown from 1.2 million to 1.77 million, with occasional boosts for some big events, like the Marvel event was apparently quite big for them. On Roblox, they claim that Grow a Garden has peaked at 21.3 million players, becoming the most popular game of all time by concurrent user count. And GamesIndustry.biz provides this helpful context. That's more people than the top 100 Steam games combined. You think about that. When we talk about the future of video games and where is the money going to go in the next 10 to 20 years, and what will the audience be craving? What will that audience want? What types of games are likely to get greenlit in an environment where they're attempting to appeal to the 21.3 million players who play Grow a Garden? I'm sorry, more people. That is the peak of like daily concurrence. That's not the total number of people that play Grow a Garden. It's actually much higher than that. They go on to say, kind of talking about some of the pop culture stuff, the success of the Minecraft movie, and how Five Nights at Freddy's is getting a sequel later this year, and some of the kind of television shows and other kind of video game stuff. But a lot of this is kind of talking about, like there's a bit here about kind of platform loyalty and that idea of the console wars. I think we've talked about this a lot, especially in light of the way that Xbox has been changing its strategy and its approach to games, to, multi-platform publishing and whatever else. There's a bit here that I think ties into that a little bit. They say here, millennials and Gen X tend to be loyal to platforms or genres. Now, the younger generations tend to be more loyal to specific experiences. They no longer identify as gamers. They identify as players of a specific game. Game communities now behave much like sports fans and celebrate content drops in games like League of Legends, much like the release of an entirely new game. And since COVID-19, there's been a rebound in interest in esports, led by one-on-one fighting games, which are the easiest for audiences to follow and understand. Marvel took on Fighting Souls proved to be a big hit with IGN's audience when it was revealed this summer, and the wireless PlayStation fighting stick, Project Defiant, garnered an enormous 6 million views on IGN's social media. So they're kind of filtering, traffic to IGN as interest in a product and trying to boil that down in a way. Now, if they can go on and link that data to sales directly and say, if you get this traffic, you will sell this many copies, that's where the money comes in. That's where GameSpot Tracks was trying to be. That's where GameSpot Tracks was for a number of years. It was a nightmare. As part of the editorial team, it was a bad thing. A good business thing, a bad thing for editors. And I'll get into why. Well, we can cover why, I guess. But I think that's interesting. A rebound in interest in esports led by one-on-one fighting games, I think, is sort of a weird thing, because I do, yes, it's technically the same thing, but I think fighting games have such a different vibe and such a different approach to competitive environments than what we think of as esports. The FGC, okay, here's the difference in fighting games, competitive fighting game scenes, and what we think of as traditional esports that I think is maybe kind of left out by a little bit of this. The people running esports are scumbags. The people running competitive fighting games are fun-loving scumbags. They're like your scumbag buddy. You're like, oh, dude, you shouldn't do that. And he's like, ah. But like the guys over here are slick in suits and they're fucking terrible nightmare people. But yes, you do have kind of the ongoing increasing Saudi interest in fighting games, which is troubling for sure. They also find that players are increasingly interested in older games. 71% of, I guess, respondents into this audience study agree that they're feeling more and more nostalgic for franchises that were around when they were kids. But they do kind of quickly cite that, hey, new IP still, can break through. Stuff like Split Fiction, Black Myth Wukong did quite well. And they're trying to like crunch their data in different ways that, like, this is me kind of looking at gamesindustry.biz's filter on this information and not the data directly, which I would be interested in seeing. But I think the thing you kind of have to remember about all of this, especially with a bit, this will sound back. This will sound. I'd mean this in the nicest way possible, I suppose. When IGN talks about nostalgia and says like, oh, our audience study is finding that players are looking back more and more, I would be very curious to know what is the actual demographic of IGN, because when I think of like nostalgia for video game coverage, that's the appeal of IGN, right? Like, are the people going to IGN, people that visit IGN, that care about it, that know what IGN is, and don't just end up there through some social channel or something like that. I think visiting a homepage of a website is a nostalgic act in and of itself these days. And so it's sort of weird, like, what I mean by that is that all of this data is IGN's data. And yes, IGN, as they say here, they have 500 million monthly visitors across 110 countries. It's very big. They've gotten very good at playing whatever is left of the SEO game. They have had pretty good social media presences in terms of driving views to their website from stories that they've posted on Twitter or whatever. Like, they've been, I think they've been the leader in this space for some time. GameSpot was kind of traditionally the number one or number two with IGN for a good long time. And I don't think GameSpot, as IGN got better and better at pursuing this stuff, I don't think GameSpot was ever able to compete on that level. And that has nothing to do with the content and who's writing the news stories and whatever that other stuff is. I think just from a strategic perspective, IGN did a much better job of like leaning into where things were going, social media and whatever else. Is that a moneymaker for them? I mean, I don't know. It's not. Is IGN profitable? Is IGN, like what kind of money is IGN making? Like, I don't have the answers to those questions. I do know that like the social media strategy of get a bunch of people to look at your Twitter account is not the same as it used to be, and it hasn't been that way for a while. And that was never something that made a ton of money unless you were straight up selling posts on Twitter. If you're like, oh yeah, we'll write a story on our website that is a sponsored piece of content, and then we will tweet about it. The piece on the website will never show up on the front page. It's dark posted. It exists on the website somewhere, but it really only exists so that we can link to it on Twitter and Facebook and wherever else, and we'll drive traffic to this thing, and it will just kind of exist in its own dark, weird ecosystem over here. Like, I assume IGN does that, because why wouldn't they? A lot of places did for a good long time. So I don't have the actual answer to that question, but I would not be surprised if that is part of the overall game that they have played over the years. But that's so like that's where I kind of look at this and I maybe give it a little bit of side eye. Is you kind of have to assume that IGN is reaching the entirety of the gaming audience for this to matter. If you view this as like, well, this is IGN reaching IGN's audience, and you look at that number, 500 million, that's a huge number. So if they're truly getting that many players and they're truly reaching that many different types of players with their surveys and audience data and this and that and their studies, then this is all probably pretty interesting. And I think a lot of this stuff rings true no matter what. Like, I do think that a lot of this stuff is sensible. Like, there's nothing in here that you go like, that's crazy, the data must be wrong. So I do think that this is probably pretty solid stuff, but that would be my thing to watch for, or to watch out for, with this stuff is like, how many How many survey respondents are they getting? Are those the people that are consider themselves IGN fans? Because that's a totally different market segment and demographic than the people that are like engaging with a trailer on IGN's YouTube channel or whatever. Like if they're aggregating all of those numbers together, like what does that really mean and whatever else. But like if I were someone, if IGN was asking me, if I were a video game publisher and IGN were coming to me and saying like, you should use this data, those would be my questions. Like, is this data truly representative of the entire gaming audience, or is it only representative of IGN's gaming audience? And what is IGN's gaming audience these days demographically and all of that stuff? They do such a good job with all the SEO and whatever else still that they probably do still attract a really wide swath of players. So, you know, like I'm also not necessarily trying to like throw a monkey wrench in this and be like, it's all suspect. But I guess like, you know, I look at this and go like, those are the questions that I have about this stuff. But it's interesting. I always found it interesting, you know, because again, we did this at GameSpot years and years ago in a different way. But the thing, so they kind of also lean into, they talk about the biggest upcoming games in this as well. And what are the big games going forward? Some of the new titles that drove the biggest traffic onto this is, again, according to gamesindustry.biz, reporting on this IGN thing. And keep in mind, the gamesindustry.biz is also owned by IGN. So I doubt they would get this wrong. But some of the new titles that drove the biggest traffic on IGN were Resident Evil Requiem, Metal Gear Solid Delta, Silent Hill F, 007 First Light, Pragmata, Marvel Tokon Fighting Souls, Call of Duty Black Ops 7, and Ghost of Yotei. That's interesting stuff, right? But I think you look at those trailers, if those are the things that are driving the biggest traffic on IGN, that says to me that they are speaking to what we think of as the traditional gaming audience, the demographic that is already aware, like an older demographic. They are not talking to the kids. Are the kids going like, I've got to see the new Resident Evil trailer? Like, let me put my phone down. Let me swipe up here and close out the garden I am growing so that I can watch this Resident Evil trailer. Like, I don't think that's the same thing. And so I think that's a very difficult, it's difficult to reach the entire gaming audience at this point, right? And I think IGN, that's why I say IGN is in some ways inherently nostalgic on its own, because it is this kind of throwback concept of a video game website. And keep in mind, this is talking specifically about the summer showcases. Someone said, oh, there's no Nintendo games. Like, yeah, Nintendo didn't announce anything during the summer showcases. They had already put out the Switch at the time of those summer showcases, so they were doing other stuff. So that's why none of their stuff is involved in any of that. So yeah, I guess like that's kind of the weird thing here. But IGN does own Humble, the Humble Bundle people. They bought that at some point. And when talking about kind of the nostalgia content, they do say that old games have been big on Humble, including Tomb Raider, Star Wars Bounty Hunter, and Legacy of Kain Soul Reaver, which have driven big increases in subscriptions, for whatever that's worth. That's interesting. So yeah, I think it's a pile of interesting data out of IGN, and it's the sort of data that we don't really get as often anymore. And if you want to see some videos of John Davison, who you may not have seen on video in a while, that's what he is hosting all of these videos. He is giving these details. So good on him and good on them for trying to put together some kind of data-driven product. It's just to me it's interesting. Again, the idea of data that comes out of a website like this, in this day and age, and what gaming is anymore, and who is driving the thing. Like, you know, they do have some kind of stuff about a younger audience and all of that. But it does say here that signing up to Gaming Trends is free, and but it does ask for like, what company do you work for and all of this other stuff. So clearly they're looking for people. You know, they're looking to get people who work in video games or want to advertise and reach the gaming demographics to sign up for this stuff. It's not necessarily something where they're just looking for the public to sign up and get access to this information. I don't know if they would. I wonder if they would just allow anybody in on this, or if this is something that they if they would be restrictive of. Anyway, I don't know. I will probably sign up for that. I'm curious about what the full data looks like. Here's another little bit of data. This seems like it is potentially leaked data. Eurogamer is reporting that the release date for Mortal Kombat Legacy Collection briefly showed up on the Xbox app from the looks of these screenshots before being pulled. That release date has not been announced, or I think they said they are currently saying fall 2025. The date being shown here that has since been removed and scrubbed from the website is September 30th, 2025. Which I'm just going to briefly look at here. That is a Tuesday, which Tuesday is still a time when some games come out. So that could make some sense. That is, of course, the documentary / emulation package of some classic Mortal Kombat games, which I think that what have they announced on that? I guess it's really the announced games are Mortal Kombat 1, 2, 3, Ultimate MK3, and 4. I think are all that they've announced for it so far. There's a ... and more on that, but it sounds like that they have not gotten around to revealing what the and more is just yet. But they have said that they will include weird console and handheld versions here. They list the Game Gear, Game Boy, 32X, Game Boy Advance. So there's going to be some interesting and strange versions of Mortal Kombat in that collection. So I'm really looking forward to it. And maybe that will be out September 30th. They were just at Comic-Con, and someone took a photo of the booth and it just said fall. So yeah, that is still an unannounced date at this time. Gamescom is coming up in a few weeks here. Microsoft has announced a little bit of detail around their plans for the German event. August 20th to the 24th, according to videogameschronicle.com. There will be a stream on the 19th, I believe, here in the States, with how the time and date and stuff works out, where that is going to be one of the first places where they show Black Ops 7. But Microsoft will be showing some games, including Hollow Knight Silksong. They are claiming the game will be playable publicly at Gamescom, which I think some people are looking forward to that game, I guess, still, somehow. People seem interested in knowing when that game is going to show up somewhere. People think it's going to be every time someone starts a live stream, someone assumes it's going to be about Hollow Knight Silksong. Here is Microsoft telling you that it will be playable at Gamescom. They will also have a bunch of third-party stuff there, including Borderlands 4, Onimusha, Metal Gear Solid Delta, which will be just about out by then, if I remember right. EA Sports FC 26. That is their soccer game. Anemo, which is that like a bootleg Amiibo cloner? What is Anemo? I don't know. It has two eyes in it, like it was Amiibo. There are no Ghosts of the Grand, Power Wash Simulator 2, Final Fantasy VII Remake Intergrade, Final Fantasy 16 Invincible Versus, Super Meat Boy 3D, Chronos: The New Dawn, and Mistfall Hunter. They will also have a theater presentation for The Outer Worlds 2, along with playable versions of Grounded 2 and Ninja Gaiden 4. That sounds like a pretty solid list of things on display. Less displayed, adult games on itch. Itch.io has de-indexed a lot of its pornography and adult-themed games. This is kind of the other follow-up to what we were talking about with Steam last week, where Steam delisted a lot of adult games due to pressure from payment processors through some fundamental religious crackpots that, you know, were harassing them. Itch has come under this same watch, and they have responded by, you know, removing a lot of de-indexing a lot of games from the platform. I think that stuff is still technically there, but you will have to know exactly where it is to get there. This stuff is still in flux. Itch's statement about it, you know, they kind of say like, hey, this is a time critical moment for us, and they apologized for not being able to warn developers that this was coming. But that this stuff is yeah, they are being forced to meet the requirements of payment processors, and it's a fucking real shit show. It's very frustrating. I don't know what the solution is to this is, because, you know, it is, as much as it sounds like it would be as simple as let's start our own payment processor, that's not something that is reasonable to just go and do, apparently, for, you know, even a company as large as Valve. And so I don't know what the solution is here, other than to push back in the same way that these payment processors are getting pushed. It sounds like that there's been a relatively concerted effort to contact Visa with complaints, contact their customer service department to complain about this, about these policies, and that they have been getting inundated with calls. So it might be worth becoming a part of that wave if you are interested in this matter. I think it's incredibly frustrating. I think it's, you know, I think this stuff should be able to exist. Like, it doesn't necessarily mean that I want it in my life or whatever, but like, there is no issue with this stuff existing and being sold, especially on a site like Itch that is already catering to, you know, people that are relatively plugged in and down a rabbit hole of sorts, looking at independent video gaming. I think that this stuff is worth protecting, and it's disgusting to see this stuff happening. Sony has given further details about its Fight Stick. They're going to show this thing off, I guess, under glass. I don't think they're going to let people touch it, but if you want to get a look at one, it's going to be at EVO, which is this weekend, by the way. They have renamed it. It was originally known as Project Defiant just 2 news stories ago. Now it is known as the Flex Strike Wireless Fight Stick. Which I don't think that's a great name. I'll level with you. I don't think Flex Strike rolls off the tongue really well. It will, if you want to run it wirelessly, it will need a link adapter they're making a USB-C version of the link adapter, which is kind of the same thing that they used for their wireless headphones, the Pulse Elite and stuff over the years. So the Fight Stick will come with a USB-C version of that you can plug into the front of a PS5. One dongle will be enough to allow you to connect 2 Fight Sticks if you are so inclined. I think it's interesting to have a Fight Stick that looks sort of like a PS5 controller, like aesthetically, but I don't know, like, I don't think the buttons on this thing look outstanding, and I kind of look at it as something. It looks very expensive. It looks like a very fancy controller. It's not going to be out until 2026, but they will be showing it. They will be showing it at EVO. In the Fight Stick Museum and in the Arc System Works booth for a first look at the Fight Stick and included sling carry case. So if you are at EVO and want to see a joystick, if you go to EVO and someone says they want to show you a joystick, you say no thank you. We don't want these events to cross over into the other type of scumbag. Remember, we got to keep it fun-loving scumbags. We like it when it's fun dirtbags into fighting games. Those are my people. I want to hang out and be weird dirtbags, but not creepy. I don't want to be, like, you know what I mean? Ugh. Gross. It's a very nice looking, sleek looking joystick. I like it. There's something appealing about that. But I don't currently use a fight stick on a regular basis anyway. I would probably pull out my leverless if I was going to be into that. B, I like it when people have their weird, customized, fucked up fight sticks that they've made that they like, with the art that they care about, with the Garfield art that they care about on the joystick. I like those sticks. Speaking of PlayStation controllers, there is a new beta version of the PS5 firmware out that they sent out keys for late last week. And this comes with a pretty interesting upgrade for controllers that I will probably get some use out of. You can now pair your PlayStation 5 controllers to up to 4 different devices at the same time. And you can basically, as you're turning the controller on, you can hit one of the face buttons on the stick, on the controller at the same time to say, no, I want to pair to this device, you know. And so it will remember the pairings for up to 4 different devices. That means you can have it tethered to your PlayStation, as you may have it now today. And you could also have it tethered to your PC at the same time, just by how you turn it on. Also your phone, if you want to use a controller on your phone, which is sometimes fun because it feels like something you shouldn't be able to do. Like sometimes playing, like having hunched over my phone holding a PlayStation controller and been like, weird, it's like I'm playing Call of Duty and it doesn't feel exactly right, but it's kind of, it's strange, but it's kind of neat. Like that's kind of cool. And a 4th device, which I don't know, I would probably use my MacBook for that, but whatever. So this is something that a lot of third-party weirdo controllers have been doing for a while, the ability to kind of store different settings and stuff. It's really neat to see Sony embrace this on a first-party controller of all things, to be like, hey, like, we recognize that sometimes you want to use this on a PC, or sometimes you are more likely you might want to use this on your phone. And it works with the DualSense Edge as well. Since this is beta firmware, if you are in the weird boat of you bought a PlayStation controller to use on a PC, but you don't actually own a PlayStation, I don't think there's currently a way for you to upgrade the firmware on the controller. The PlayStation app that they issue, the accessories app that they put out for people that want to upgrade firmware on PC is not a part of this beta. So you know, you're probably not able to do that upgrade until it comes out of beta for real or whatever. But I took my DualSense Edge that I use on my PC. I plugged it into the PlayStation long enough for it to update the firmware, and then started messing with it a little bit. It's a nice to have feature. It's handy, for sure, and an interesting thing for a first party controller to do, I would say, because that's, I don't know, and you wouldn't think they would come up with an idea to be that flexible, because they probably just look at it and go like, yeah, use a PlayStation controller, play your PlayStation games on it, dummy. But I don't know. I thought that was a cool upgrade, for sure. As someone who has been using a PlayStation controller on PC for a good long time. And that's it for the news. Why don't we see if there's any emails here? podcast@guard.bike is the email address. That's the proper email address to send emails into. I did get an email, however, from this comes to us from Harris, who sends in an email with the subject line, "Mr. Do is real." Just a very compelling concept. He says, "I'm currently sitting in an airplane, specifically that part of the airplane where you get free drinks." Wow, way to brag about, like, you know, wow, congratulations on sitting in business class, Harris. Here's my question. Mr. Do is real, and you get the opportunity to spend a day with him. What are you getting up to? Um, Jesus Christ. I don't, that's sad that, look, I don't know, man. Like, Mr. Do seems like, he would be all about his business. He'd be about wanting to dig in the dirt and get some cherries and whatever else. I don't know what, Mr. Do is into finding diamonds and fighting to, save his castle from monsters. Maybe I could help him out with that. I don't know that I would want to, because the monsters, they're pretty smart. They start out pretty dumb, but they think, they evolve. They get to like level 3, and then they go like, oh, I'm going to back away from that hammer and not get hit anymore. And it's pretty crazy to see them become so smart. And so I don't know that I would be equipped to take them on the same way Mr. Do is. I think, it would be fun to take Mr. Do to, I don't know if it's Cave In Rock or wherever it is, but, to go to the gathering of Juggalos with I think to just kind of shadow such an illustrious and well-renowned clown as Mr. Do at an event like that. Like, how would he be received? I would be very interested to see that. Like, maybe they would hate him. Maybe they'd be like, you represent the clown establishment, and we represent alternative clowning, and we're not down with that. Maybe it would be beef. I don't really know how that would go, but I would be interested to kind of like, just kind of roll as part of Mr. Do's entourage for a little bit and kind of see where the day takes us. I wouldn't want to drink with Mr. Do. I wouldn't want, like, that seems like a fool's errand. I feel like Mr. Do is a monster in those specific ways. He's whether he's eating, drinking, throwing, or crushing, Mr. Do is very active, and I don't know that I would trust him. I don't know that that seems again terrifying. Let's see here. What other emails do we have? I'm hitting the wrong buttons. Shiny from Indianapolis writes in and says, I was playing some Symphony of the Night recently, and it's pretty nuts that the entire inverted castle is hidden and requires certain items to be used during a boss fight. So I have to ask you, what's the biggest surprise you've seen from a game developer? It doesn't necessarily have to be good or bad. I think the biggest surprise, I always go back to the Metal Gear Solid 2 play, like, and Halo 2 protagonist stuff. Metal Gear, I think more so than Halo, but at the time with Halo 2, it was a very big deal that you spent a good chunk of that game not playing as the Master Chief. And for Metal Gear Solid 2, I think it was an even bigger deal that you spend the majority of that game playing as Raiden. I think that's stuff that is, and those are surprises that I kind of had spoiled for me as a part of the review process. And I didn't review either of those games, but I, had to talk to the reviewers about them and say like, okay, there's things in here that you're talking around. We need to talk about this. Like, I need to know what we're not referring to here. What are we not spoiling here? We need to know, just to make sure that this review is handling it correctly. And so, I was walked through all of that stuff, at a time when that was those were both surprisingly well kept secrets. And those are kind of, I would call those kind of shocking in a way, with the way that those went. But yeah, I'm trying to think, like, it's like games within games, or, like whatever other sort of like, I can't believe this is this, or, yeah, those are probably the two big ones that come to mind. Let's see. Yeah, I mean, frog fractions, sure. Yeah, I mean, I also kind of, because like frog fractions, I didn't have the pure experience. I don't know anyone who did with the original frog fractions of like playing that and thinking it's just a math game, and without playing it without the knowledge of like, hey man, you should check this thing out. It goes places. You need to check out frog fractions. Like it like the recommendation always had to kind of carry a certain amount of like, no, dude, you need to check this out. And Glitterman Garden or Glitterman Grove, I reviewed, like I got that game with the knowledge that it was what it was. And so yeah, I didn't necessarily have that experience. But again, that's even back then, Steam was in such a place that it was very easy to games come and go, and it would have been very, if no one told you, no, you need to check this out, you might not know about it. Glitterman with Frog Fractions 3, with Glitterman and Grove, it was interesting because I had heard from someone else who was playing it, and they were like, "Oh yeah, he sent it out." Yeah, no, it's yes. I am in possession of the thing that is the of Frog Fractions. And I was like, "Fuck, really?" And so I had to write and be like, "Hey, I heard this was can I get a copy of this?" And so I got it. And so you ask for a code for the thing, the Frog Fractions sequel. The next great game from the makers of Frog Fractions, and you just get a Steam key for something called Glitterman Grove. Like, oh shit. Like I never would have, like no one would have ever found, no one will ever find this naturally. It is hidden in some ways, hidden too well. Let's see. Mark writes in and asks, which is more stable, PC or console gaming? It's already a weird question. Between PC and console gaming, which do you think is currently the more stable side of the industry? By the most stable, I mean the one with the least volatility, or the one that faces the fewest imminent threats that might cause a major change in how or how often it's consumed, like a crash. It feels like Microsoft and Sony are starting to struggle with the value proposition of a console, as well as ways to meaningfully differentiate them, and PC performance is, of course, bottlenecked, and meaningfully differentiate them. And PC performance is, of course, bottlenecked by a few stupidly expensive, hard-to-find components. Which side would you be more concerned about at this moment? I realize I didn't mention Nintendo. They kind of play in their own sandbox and seem to be less vulnerable to market trends. Is that what it takes to thrive now? So I guess like the big picture answer to your question is that they are both completely tied and tethered together, because a lot of the same games come out on all platforms. And so PC and console ultimately are not that different. I think when we break down market forces and things that are impacting Microsoft's console business, that is where it starts to separate a little bit. The thing about PC and the resilience thereof is that, ultimately there are multiple architectures or multiple chip manufacturers out there. And so you talk about like, expensive, hard to find components. Yeah, but you don't have to fucking get that shit. Like, you don't have to go buy NVIDIA's best card. You don't have to buy an NVIDIA card at all. AMD's cards are very serviceable, if not solid, for the price. And so there are ways to build a PC, even one that is more powerful than current consoles, without having to go crazy and like go overbuy and overpay for a GPU or some other part that is only available on fucking StockX or whatever, right? Like that stuff is, you can go get an AMD CPU. You can roll the dice with an Intel CPU and hope that they won't catch on fire. I have an Intel CPU currently. My last machine was an AMD, and when I was building this one out, I was like, fuck it, let's go Intel this time. That'll be fun. Just change it up. Just change it back, And then ended up with a 14th generation. And I've updated my BIOS and all this other stuff, and so I don't believe the CPU has been straight up damaged by the issue that those CPUs have. But anyway, point being, you have some room to move on the PC because you can always you don't have to build top of the line, and you probably shouldn't. because I think the 50 series cards, as speaking as the owner of a 50 series card, I think it's been a fucking fucked up generation so far. In terms of like things acting weird and drivers and whatever else is going, like there's just been just enough weird stuff over the last few months with NVIDIA drivers that it's been a bummer. And developers don't feel like they're taking dramatic advantage of whatever that ability is, the power of the 50 series cards, right? And I think when you look at the numbers and the benchmarks and everything, and in terms of raw power, the 50 series over the 40 series, like the bump is not that dramatic. It is instead that they have doubled down on their kind of machine learning powered shit and been like, now you can generate even more fake frames. Which, to be fair, I have turned on some frame generation in a couple of games relatively recently out of curiosity, and have found that the input latency that was so prevalent and noticeable on 40 series cards is not as bad. It is much closer to where you would want it to be. So maybe in some ways, the same way that when the first generation of cards that did ray tracing were kind of a joke, maybe the first series of frame gen was kind of a joke too. And some of that stuff has been implemented well, better than others, I guess I should say. But like, it's not a raw, it's not like raw performance. You're not like, this card is a beast. It's like, this card is slightly better than the 4090, and then also has a bunch of other weird smoke and mirrors, bells and whistles that, technically result in more frames or more performance here and in these specific scenarios. And all that stuff's frustrating. But whatever. You don't have to fucking even think about that shit. Just go get a card that is in your price range. And you could, probably still beat current console performance if you so desire, without having to engage in auctions and, bidding up weird shit, right? So I will say in that specific way, the PC market is somewhat more resilient than consoles, because, when consoles sell out, they're sold out and you can't find one and it's a hassle. And that's the only thing that runs those games, and it's annoying. And I think that's kind of whatever, I think that the ways in which gaming is changing will impact consoles first. And we see that with the stuff that Microsoft is going through. We see, Sony has open job positions for like portfolio managers for multi-platform releases, where they're like, oh, we want people in positions that can, help bring our library to other platforms, including Nintendo Switch and including the Xbox, and including, and they list Xbox by name. I mean, obviously, like Helldivers is coming to Xbox, next month. Sony, as we've said before, has a very different approach to its multi-platform stuff than Xbox does, where PlayStation is willing to wait, and they will treat the PlayStation as, kind of first-class citizens, and everyone else gets it later. Whereas on the Xbox side, they're like, why wait? Like, let's just get it all now. Let's, and I think that, in time, I would not be shocked to see PlayStation go down the same road, if only because it helps them benefit from the initial marketing push for the PlayStation version. If they all come out at once across all platforms, then that's more people talking about it. That's more, there's more word of mouth to go around. There's, the marketing money can reach a higher potential number of players and all of that. And they might as well. I don't think PlayStation users lose out in a real way on that. And so at a time when, what we thought of as their closest competition has gone like, yeah, whatever, man. We're putting our games out everywhere. Like, fuck on, who cares? I think it probably makes sense for PlayStation to eventually get there. And that doesn't mean that consoles shouldn't exist or whatever, but I think if you value consoles as a place to play exclusive games, that's not something that, today's consumers are as caught up in as you are. You have like broken forum argument brain from 20 years ago. You're a weird old man and you've clung to a bunch of bullshit that you need to shake loose of, because the industry has kind of moved past a lot of that. And it's not a real thing anymore. And so, yeah, I look at that as like, there will need to be some kind of shift in the console space around those lines. And what does it mean to be what does it mean to buy a PlayStation? What are the expectations as a PlayStation owner? And, will those change a little bit or whatever? But I don't think that means it's like, oh, consoles are over or whatever. Like, there's still value in like, here's a box that you just plug the cables into the back of it and just turn it on and go. You're not going to have to fucking flash BIOS updates. You're not going to have to fucking set jumpers. You're not going to have to open it up and do anything with it unless you want to put a new hard drive in it or whatever. Like, some players want that closed ecosystem because of the ease of use, and they're willing to give up a level of control that you get on the PC to attain that. And I think that that's valuable. I think that that's something that, like, if anything, as we talk more and more about handheld PCs, that should be the goal of these handheld PCs, is to duplicate as much of that experience as they possibly can to make those devices more and more mainstream, because they make them easy to use, But I do think, the PlayStation job opening around multi-platform stuff, I think, we saw some headlines around that, but really what that's going to end up being is I think a lot of teams within PlayStation want their games on Switch too, and this is going to lead to that. I think that we're going to see, that will end up being, because I think that that's a space that they're not currently in, and maybe that song and dance changes if Sony decides to really lean into handhelds of its own. But I do think that by and large, the big Sony franchises will eventually end up on Switch too. I think it just makes sense. Worldwide, right? Putting it on Switch 2, a platform that is selling well in a lot of other territories, and I think it just makes a ton of sense. Xbox, I think, makes slightly less sense because you don't hit that same worldwide market, and that's almost like a stop. Like, if the next line of Xboxes are just Windows machines, then you're just making a PC port anyway, and you're not really making an Xbox version per se. Daddy Warbucks from Oregon writes in and says, Donkey Kong Bonanza is a collectathon-ass collectathon. I think Nintendo proved here that you can absolutely make a modern collectathon game. You just have to actually put in some legwork to update that game design. To me, this game feels like a reimagined Donkey Kong 64, where they fixed the tedious character swapping mechanic, cleaned up some of the superfluous collectibles, and gave you tools to track down those last few bananas. I doubt we'll see a resurgence in the genre, but it sure would be cool if Microsoft did anything with Banjo and Kazooie. I don't. So I'll tell you why I don't think that Donkey Kong Bonanza is a true collectathon game. It's because the bananas don't actually do anything, and the fossils don't. No progression is gated by you. I watched one professional streamer, Sebmal, play through Donkey Kong Bonanza last week, getting 0 bananas, and it was mind-blowing. It hurt me, like, watching him play it and watching him run past bananas and not punch them. It was very traumatizing to me personally, and I think that he should apologize for running that stream, because every banana I saw go uneaten was an opportunity for me to go, ooh, banana. But since he didn't get them, I couldn't say it, and it just felt unrealized, and I feel sick about it. But you can play that game. You can finish that game getting 0 bananas. Whereas, the collectathon, I think that a lot of that stuff comes down to you. Oh, how fast can you get all these? I mean, there are 1,000 bananas in that game. It's not like 5 per level, It's not like, oh, we put some jigsaw pieces in here and there's 7 of them or 10 of them or, there's 1,000 goddamn bananas in that game. That's a lot. That's not a collectathon. That's like they're everywhere. That's like you're punching into a random pile of rock and going, oh, banana. Because you're just stumbling upon them all the time. That is a very different sort of thing. It is only a collectathon if you have decided in your sick mind that you need to have all of the bananas. Which is, you know, of course you would want all the bananas. I want all the bananas. But I'm not getting all the bananas. I'm barely getting any of the bananas comparatively. And I think that that's part of what makes it such an interesting game. I think design-wise, it's just such a strange approach to that I don't think you can just refer to it as, especially as you have done here, a collectathon, because it is certainly not one of those. It's adjacent to that conceptually, I would suppose, but again, you don't need them to finish that entire game. Joe in Seattle writes in with a time, like a slightly different spin on a question that we get asked a lot over the years. Why are studios, publishers, hardware manufacturers, etc. so secretive? On the last episode, you were talking about Digital Extremes not being able to get a hold of a Switch 2 dev kit and about how even confirmation of the system was doled out sparingly. What is the business reason for such secrecy? Why would it matter to Nintendo if the details of their next system are out in the wild early? I get wanting to control messaging around products, but it doesn't seem like it's worth all the rigmarole. I tend to agree with you. As I've said about secrecy in the video game industry, I think there's a little too much of it, but I think there are a handful of different reasons around this. Some of them competitive in nature. The Switch is a little bit resistant to that because the Switch is the Switch and Nintendo is Nintendo. But in a case where, you know, let's fast forward another 5 or 10 years down the line and assume that everyone is still out here making things. If Nintendo is making a third Switch in a market where there are suddenly a lot more handheld devices, and that Microsoft is selling handhelds, and that Sony is selling handhelds, and that a billion other companies are selling handheld PCs and whatever, the details of, like, here's what the Switch 3 is capable of help inform those other companies as to, like, oh, if we want to beat them, we either need to come in under, we know that they're going for this price, we know that they're going for this level of power or these parts, and so we know our parts are better than theirs, and so we can market it on the basis of, like, this is the most powerful handheld on the block, because they know that Nintendo is locked in on a lesser spec. Like, that was always kind of the traditional reasoning for it, was like, you know, there was a competing console out there that you were trying to make sure that they weren't able to go, oh, they're doing this, we're going to undercut them by $100. We're going to cut RAM here, we're going to do this, and we're going to put our console out for $299. Fuck those other fools. You know? And so I think everyone's still a little gun shy because of the number of years that things were like that when it comes to hardware specifically. But yeah, they don't want leaks. They also, I think, when it comes to the public and leaks of what they're doing, there are a couple of things, right? If the talk about their next console gets too loud too early, it starts to impact the sales of their existing console. If it is just a fully open secret of, oh yeah, the Switch 2 is in development, it's coming out in June of next year, or 2 years in June, you know, this is around the time they're going to bring it out, here's what it can do. Like, you might not buy a Switch. You might just say, oh, I'm going to wait for that. And so there are reasonings around that stuff to not get too much information floating around about your next thing. Like, obviously, everyone's always working on what's next and everything, but the more specific that gets, the more likely you are to impact sales of your current device, right? Developers and disclosure to developers, like, you know, yeah, there are going to be situations where, like, yeah, and the way that they disclosed, the way that Nintendo has disclosed the existence of their consoles to people over the years has largely been unchanged. But, again, it's because they don't want that shit to leak out into the public. They don't want everyone to be just careless with it and be like, oh, well, yeah, I mean, the Switch 2 is this and that and it's coming out here and whatever. Because they don't want that information to just be out there in the public all the time. They want to control which developers have what, even if there's not really a great reason to do so. They, I think they want to maintain a certain level of control over that information, and be able to pick and choose, who's going to get it when. I think the dev kit situation is kind of the weird thing. But like Nintendo has always been a company that's been like, okay, we're going to give you one dev kit and you need to leave it locked in this room with no like no one, only these 14 people can fucking touch this. And so you have to you have to sign your life away that say you are not going to let anyone else in your studio handle this device. It is locked in this room. It is chained down. It phones home, so if it leaves, then Nintendo immediately knows. If the internet in your office goes down, you're getting a phone call. Hey, it stopped checking in. What the fuck's going on? You're like, oh, our internet's down. Get it back up. What the fuck? Did someone steal it? Are you looking at it right now? Like that's how they have handled that stuff in the past. Even with sometimes, they have had those types of devices go to the press where they've been always online and they check in and all of that stuff as well. So for studios, especially before a system has been officially announced and the specs are already out there, I think that's the sort of stuff that, and I think it does get easier for Nintendo. Once the specs are out, once they've announced the thing, once games have shipped and whatever else, like it is a much different scenario, right? Then it's like, okay, yeah, dev kits can kind of be wherever, but like now we're hearing the dev kits are still in very short supply for whatever reason, and I think that's weird. I find it strange that the developers that have shipped successful games and stuff and like that they would be out there going like, oh yeah, we don't have one yet. Like that really? That seems weird. I mean, there's probably some work you can do just knowing the specs and knowing what Nintendo's basic SDKs are like. You're just like, okay, well, like moving from this chip to this chip, there'll be some changes we'll have to make directly for compatibility reasons, but obviously we can probably put this type of texture quality into this version of the game and this and that and and whatever else. But yeah, I don't know. I think secrecy around game announcements and stuff is always sort of weird. Especially in a world where, like there are fewer big AAA games all the time, right? There are not as many as there used to be. And so, there used to be some competitive reasoning around like, oh, we're not going to tell them what the next GTA is going to have in it because then it will give a heads up to all the people making GTA knockoffs of like, oh, we should put swimming in our game too. It's like weird features like, like, oh, we're going to make it so you get fat when you eat hamburgers in our game too. And we're going to ship 3 months before GTA, as if that like is a massive differentiator that people are going to, well, I'm not buying GTA because it's Saints Row now. I can go to Freckle Bitches and I can eat these burgers and I can get fat. Just like San Andreas. I'm not waiting for San Andreas. I'm playing this. Like, that's not a fucking thing, man. That never would have been a thing. But yeah, there've been some weird secrecy around a lot of games over the years, but they spend a lot of money on it. They come up with their ideas. They want their ideas to be unique. They don't, they want as little as possible to get out there and all of that. But I do think all the time, especially with just fewer and fewer games of that size and scale being made now, it seems more ridiculous. Let's see. Nauticals writes in from Chicago. Says, as someone who regularly follows and participates in the fighting game community, Mortal Kombat has always been somewhat of an anomaly to me. Mortal Kombat as a series is undeniably one of the most successful in the fighting game genre and has regularly outpaced tentpoles like Street Fighter and Tekken in sales. It has an enormous mainstream audience, but when it comes to competition and hobby diehards, that popularity doesn't seem to translate over. The games regularly feature at events like EVO and Combo Breaker, but often have the lowest entrant numbers of those featured and are beaten out by niche anime fighters like Under Night and Melty Blood. This isn't to say there aren't dedicated competitive players in tournaments for Mortal Kombat games, but rarely ever at the level of its genre rivals, especially those that also share roots in the arcade scene. I have great respect for the legacy of MK and the impact it's had on the genre, particularly when it comes to single-player content and the transition from arcades to consoles, but I've never been a direct fan myself. Was curious to hear what you had to say about this and what the causes might be. Is it a greater development focus on mainstream appeal and sales, or lack of a significant Japanese scene? Has Sonic Fox's multi-game dominance simply scared off players? I understand this is asking about a niche sub-community's feeling towards an already niche genre, but I've always found the apparent disconnect interesting. Yeah, it is sort of a weird thing. Yeah, I mean, there are times when Mortal Kombat was not widely available in Japan for a variety of reasons. The Mortal Kombat is structured so differently from a lot of other fighting games. And I think that the things you need to do to excel in that game, when it comes to combos and combo extension and stuff, can be a little... I don't know. I was going to say a little esoteric, but I guess you could say the same thing about some of the high-level tech in Street Fighter these days as well. It's just it comes from a slightly different place, but it's kind of 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. I think everything you're citing here is probably a little bit of a knock-on effect, right? That Mortal Kombat was never always like a big thing in Japan, and so it doesn't necessarily... Like, Mortal Kombat doesn't seem to have a really worldwide scene. Competitively, I mean, like worldwide, I think there are players who enjoy that franchise and have enjoyed it for a lot of years and whatever else. But they build that game with their story modes and all of that stuff, and they chase after a different audience. I think they try to court a different audience. Deliberately so, but just by the way they focus on kind of the big cinematic stories and whatever else. Like, I don't know what it is about like even back in the early days when there really wasn't that much difference in terms of like the lore present in Mortal Kombat 2 versus the lore of like a Street Fighter 2 or Super Street Fighter 2 or whatever. Mortal Kombat as a universe just always felt like it had more depth. And maybe it's because they were going from 1 to 2 to 3 as opposed to Street Fighter 2 to Turbo to Super Street Fighter 2 to, to Super Turbo and whatever else. They kind of chewed through a trilogy of story in a very similar time frame as Capcom not shipping Street Fighter 3. And that's probably part of why that game, that franchise, has always been kind of thought of as like, hey, here's this big weird story. Also, it's a game that is born out of a lot of that mainstream appeal, I think, is born out of a certain amount of shock value from those early games, right? Like, they stood out to people who didn't even play video games. It attracted a lot of attention, positive and negative, just by virtue of not looking like anything else on the market. And the finishing moves in that game really set it apart from not just other fighting games, but from other games and other mediums in some ways as well. And so, early Mortal Kombat, I think, maybe got kind of a weird reputation around it because of that. And I will say that, like, from my perspective, it has always been this way. Like, I would say all the way back to Mortal Kombat 1, there has been a certain amount of disdain inside of the fighting game scenes that I have been part of back in those years. There were players that just had a certain amount of disdain or disgust for what Mortal Kombat was and how it played. sometimes that came down to people just didn't like the idea of a block button, which I always found relatively easy to just migrate back and forth one to the other. But there was a feeling at the time that the depth of Mortal Kombat 1 and maybe early Mortal Kombat 2, maybe even that initial kind of arcade run of Mortal Kombat 1 through 4, if we really want to. But these were conversations I was having when MK1 was still the game. That there was no depth to it. Like, I think that was something that people took on as like, oh, yeah, I mean, it's fun that you can do this shit, but there's no game there. Like, it's fucking, like the people would snidely say that Mortal Kombat is checkers to Street Fighter's chess, as an example. And I think when you look at the early days of MK1, when you look at modern Mortal Kombat, I think that's a ridiculous comparison to make. But I think when you look at MK1 before it hit its final patch, like the early days of all of the fucking insane Sub-Zero corner shit in the earlier revisions of MK1, which is when I was having these conversations, you could see why people would say that, because there was a lot of bullshit in early revisions of Mortal Kombat 1. And I think that that's something that that cast kind of a long shadow over it. Like, a lot of the initial impression from people who were serious about fighting games back then were just like, oh, dude, fuck this. Like, what is this? Fucking, I'm going to freeze, slide, dap, slide again, freeze again. Like, all of the broken shit you could do in the early revs of those games. And then, Mortal Kombat 3 came out, and people, I think a lot of those same people just kind of glommed on to the way the combo system worked, like, oh, this dial-a-combo bullshit, and just like, they would just look down their nose at it for whatever reason, and yeah, you could attribute that, as you could say, like, oh, is it because it's not Japanese? Like, yeah, maybe there's some fucking bullshit there that you could attribute, as like maybe part of that back then. But I always kind of viewed it as like the stuff you need to do in modern Mortal Kombat to be really good at it is kind of fucked up. And like, I can occasionally pull out some decent, combos in a street, not in a competitive setting, but like, I can do the shit. I can execute some of the more difficult things to do in Street Fighter. Whereas like some of the timing and the things you need to do to extend combos in modern Mortal Kombat, I think are like, it's a lot of fucking crazy shit. And it's very easy to drop combos in that game. And, I think that, Mortal Kombat also kind of pursues its legacy. And I think that is, there's positives to that. And I think there's negatives to that. I think a lot of people who look at Mortal Kombat right now, if they're not like invested in the nuance and the reasons why, I think you have people that look at modern Mortal Kombat just from an animation perspective, and they just go, why is it so stiff? Why does it look like that? Like, it just, the hits look weird. This look, there's just a weird, like, the animation doesn't flow. And I always look at that as something that in a lot of ways feels like it is deliberately built in a way that harkens back to the origins of the series, especially modern Mortal Kombat over these last few years, where they've very directly tried to tap into that original trilogy. And so I don't necessarily mean like the animations of the moves or the floor. I mean like anything that happens between moves, anytime where you get control back, where it goes from like, okay, I'm going to do a hop punch, and then I'm going to do a standing punch, or I'm going to do this combo. Like, yeah, Scorpion throwing the spear looks fluid and fucking amazing, but some of the frames that happen between that sometimes look funky. To me, that is something that taps into the origins of Mortal Kombat, and I look at that and go like, I actually, like, it would be weird if it didn't kind of look like this, because this is sort of the way this game has always sort of looked. I think you could also maybe attribute it, like Mortal Kombat's a weird franchise, right? Because it changed dramatically. They had their first 4 arcade games, which are, iterations on the same ideas. By the time you get to Mortal Kombat 4, like, it is still recognizable as, like, there's Mortal Kombat stuff in here. They just kind of made it 3D and you can throw heads around and whatever. But it's still the same button layout, like the same basic idea. And then you go from that, you get into Deadly Alliance and Deception and all of that. You get into that PS2 era, and they made a completely different game. Those games do not feel like the games that came before it. They threw away everything that they had, with the exception of, like, oh, Scorpion should throw a spear. Like character traits and things that they, should happen or whatever. They threw that all out in favor of trying to kind of make a weapons fighter. And at the time, I liked those games, but the thing I liked about those games was that they really expanded on the lore and that's when they started having bigger story modes. They started having motor combat and puzzle combat, and like they really started exploring a lot of different shit in ways that made it kind of a different thing. And so, but when I go back to it now, I think it's really hard to go back to that PS2 Xbox era of Mortal Kombat. I don't think those games play especially well. I think that there's stuff that, like, on paper made a ton of sense, where it's like, we're going to put these 3 lights below the life bar. When this light is on, you can do a stage fatality. When this light's on, but he moved out of the way, and so the light went out. And so, like, there's just UI stuff that's kind of crazy that they're trying to convey. But, like, they're, figuring out how to make a truly 3D game after Mortal Kombat 4, and they're looking at Soul Calibur, and they're looking at Tekken, and they're looking at, like, they're looking at all the stuff out there and going, like, we should be tapping into this. And I don't think that they achieved that. But they did find really exciting, weird story modes and started doing really strange things with their lore and their universe and all this other weird shit, that those games were still engaging, even if the fighting in them wasn't always good. That said, when they started getting back to it with MK versus DC, and you started to see more of the roots of proper original Mortal Kombat existing in those games, for me, that was a very welcome return. Enough time had passed. It was like, yes, we need to get back to what matters, and that's standing on a 2D plane and throwing fucking spears at these motherfuckers. And I think all of that adds up to, because, this hasn't always been the same game. If you were raised in the PS2 era, you got a Mortal Kombat game that just doesn't exist anymore. And so even if you were somehow, if you were very into that game's gone. There's no competitive scene for that. Now it's back onto this other thing. And so part of those changes probably shook loose some players along the way that maybe would have stuck with it competitively if it had kind of been the same thing. I mean, say what you will about Street Fighter, they do make big changes, but like Street Fighter is kind of the same thing. And I think that's to its credit by and large. But I think that's probably part of it. I don't know that Sonic Fox's dominance has scared off players. To me, I look at what a player like Sonic Fox does to win, and I look at it and go like, "This. I don't think I want to get good at I don't think I could. This isn't me going like I could do that, but I don't want." It's both. It's I don't know that I could do that, but also I don't know that I want to do that. And yeah, I don't know. I think that all kind of adds up to a rut. I think, when we talk about Mortal Kombat and the future of Mortal Kombat, I do think it needs another big shakeup. Much like it saw in the PS2 era. Like the time is probably right for them now to make a different game. A different Mortal Kombat game, I mean. Because I think they've gotten about as much as they can out of the current systems. And I think it's time for kind of a full rethink. And I don't know how you do that. I don't know how you do a full rethink while still, you know, if you're trying to retain something that makes Mortal Kombat, you know, Injustice or something along those lines is probably the solution. A non-Mortal Kombat game to give them a place to experiment and try some new stuff. I think could be really neat. Mortal Kombat 1, the most recent Mortal Kombat game, Mortal Kombat 1, feels like that bridge game that like, hey, this is the last one of these we can make because we have to do something larger and more different going forward. We have to, you know, we can't just take 2 years and put this out again. You know, like it has to be something, a much larger shift in terms of gameplay and, you know, just character design and content and whatever else, you know, like it needs a big shakeup again. And I think they're the one franchise that can get away with it again, because I think you have a lot of players that come to it for the lore and the story and whatever else. You know, they're not going to be big enough fighting game fans to go like, oh, I can't believe that they, you know, like for me, it was something of a travesty when, you know, Mortal Kombat 5 comes out and they're like, by the way, to do a spear now, it's back forward and not back. I'm like, you guys are criminals. They should put you in under the jail. What do you are, this is jail time for you for what you have done to me. But I do think that there's, you know, I would like to see a real crazy shakeup, something wild, you know, because like, when was the last time? What was the last fighting game you played that you were like, oh my God, this is like a dramatic shift in you know, in what my expectations are for this genre, or like how it moves, how it plays. You know, is it something like some of the stuff that ArcSys has been doing? Is it, you know, is it Dragon Ball? You know, in a weird way. Yeah, Guilty Gear Strive. I think, you know, like there's, you know, just some weird anime fighter nonsense. MVC2, I think that MVC2 is definitely like a pivot point for fighting games. And I think we had to kind of pivot back from it because I think MVC2 is too crazy for a lot of people. Certainly too crazy for me. In some ways, MVC2 is like the mastery of the old form. It's like the last game that then fighting games kind of had to go dark for a bit until Street Fighter 4 came out and turned it all back on or something, right? It's a weird kind of cutoff. It was like, okay, we have made these types of 2D fighters as crazy as it can get. And now what? You know? Yeah, I don't know, man. I even, you know, when you look at where Tekken is at these days, like people are fucking not happy about Tekken. And, you know, Street Fighter, I feel like Street Fighter has done a good job of like maintaining, right? Like they found a good groove in Street Fighter 4. I think 5, they maybe went a little too far in a couple of ways, and now with where they're at, with 6, I think they've found their lane again, you know. I remember going and playing 4 for the first time. And in Las Vegas, Capcom had like their annual event, and they just had like 4 candy cabs set up and said, here is Street Fighter 4. We also have Neopets for the Wii over here. And I'm like, yeah, I'll get to that. Let me check out this fighting game you have. And just being fucking blown away, man. Like basically, like that was all anyone wanted to do was sit in that room forever. And that was an event where the guy who was doing PR for Capcom actually had brought a Rock Band kit, and so they had this suite where they had all the games set up. And you they had the event there and people were checking out games or whatever else, and they had Street Fighter 4 and then whatever else they had. But also he had brought a Rock Band set up, and so at night people were just still hanging out there playing Rock Band. But also there were these Street Fighter cabinets there, and so it was like, well, I'm just going to sit here and keep playing fucking Street Fighter. And that was cool. Like just having like unfettered access to Street Fighter 4 for a little period of time there was cool, because that game was fucking incredible. Like from moment one, you're like, oh my God, like this is like, it seemed like fighting games were back. Like you were holding it in your hand. You're like, this is, they did the thing, man. Holy shit. It was like immediate in a way that, yeah, in a way that Street Fighter 3 did not accomplish in its day. It felt like, oh, you found a way to make fighting games somewhat more accessible again, in a way that, it took Street Fighter 3 games to kind of get there. But even then, it's easy to forget now, because I think so many more games are more technical just generally. Well, like at the time, Street Fighter 3 was too much for people. When you think about the popularity of Street Fighter 2, when you think about how fucking wild and crazy and over the top Street Fighter 2 was, and how culturally, like important Street Fighter 2 was, and all the number of people who played that game that had no idea, whatever. Street Fighter 4, at least in the early days of it, felt a lot like that. Obviously over time, Street Fighter 4 got all into its focus attacks and dash cancels and everything else, and the higher level play started getting to a point where you're like, these are the dark days. Yeah, it was sort of a different thing there over the course of the years that it was popular. But yeah, I don't know. It's Mortal Kombat is kind of a weird thing. And Mortal Kombat is a weird cultural touchstone in a lot of ways, that, like they're putting out that movie, and, they've had multiple movies and multiple reboots, and talking to them, I've been talking to Ed Boon about it a little bit over the years, and, and he's been going strong this entire time, and the franchise keeps like picking up steam. I think that's the other part of this, is I think, inside of this community, inside of, kind of the larger kind of fighting game community, people feel a type of way about Mortal Kombat, right? They go like, oh, it's this, it's that, it's not this, like it attracts the players that it attracts, but it's not getting, it has never gotten the level of signups as, as a Street Fighter game or whatever, right? But like from an overall sales standpoint and how well it's done and how many people have picked it up, and like it transcends that audience by an order of magnitude, something. It's like it sells extremely well. It ends up being one of the best selling games of the year when it comes out, and even Mortal Kombat 1, which I think people kind of got a little cold on and stuff, but like people fucking dig that shit. They don't necessarily dig it as a competitive thing. I think that's honestly, if I were to look at like how to make Mortal Kombat like a strong online or strong competitive game, I wonder if it's like tapping into that a little bit more and going like, hey, like, because Mortal Kombat is complex, right? Like the combo theory and timing your juggles and like all of that, the execution on it, like there's a lot going on, And I wonder how do you, can you have a complex fighting game with a lot of options for players to execute, depending on the situation, but also making something that like is less daunting to those more mainstream players that might never get involved in this sort of thing. Like, could you make a game that was deliberately straightforward in, you know, I'm not saying like it's just an execution thing. I'm not saying it's a modern controls, like, you know, EO situation. It's not just like make Mortal Kombat easy operation. It's like, I think combo breakers are a really good indicator of like you kind of have gotten too far up your own, you know, like this stuff has gone too far that you now need to have like, okay, we've got this artificial resource that you're also earning up, and at some point in various times in franchise history, you could only have 3 of them per round, you know, like that stuff always felt like a weird thing. But anyway, it's a complicated topic. It always has been. But I wonder if there's a way to make a game that is just more straightforward and maybe doesn't have extreme combo extension potential the way that modern Mortal Kombat does. It's just like, all right, you hit him up there and do a few hits and you're done. And then the fight goes on and we're back to neutral and we do that, you know, we go again, you know. I wonder if that would be something that could help the game appeal to a wider, like, if not the existing kind of fighting game community, could it be something that you know, appeals at least to that more mainstream audience? Anyway, that's going to do it for me here. As a program note, I will not be with you tomorrow on Wednesday, but will be with you for a long time on Friday. Having a big birthday stream for Friday. I'll let you know the start time when I get a little closer. I got to work out some stuff with, you know, my wife and the kids and everything and figure out what's going to happen. But like, I'll be with you Friday morning for, I don't know, maybe 10 or 11 hours. Who knows? It's 9 to 12 hours. I don't know. We'll see. But I will not be with you on Wednesday because my wife's going to be out of town for a little bit and I'm going to be hanging out with the kids. So I can't stream with the kids. It's against the law. So yes, I will talk to you on Friday and we'll do something. I don't even know. I have not planned a big, I should just stream a bunch. That'd be fun. I should just stream a bunch of video games. So that's as far as I've gotten for Friday. So come through, we'll hang out, we'll do something, and I will see you then. Bye.